Here's Mike Gill.
Hey, Sports Bash Tuesday starts now. 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. What's up, everybody? Woo, that was some night last night for Sixer fans or even people who want to see the team absolutely implode. I think you got your wishes. You got your wishes last night. Congratulations. They absolutely quit. Holy mackerel, that was bad. You're down 50 in your own building against a team that is trying to lose. That's hard to do. It's impressive. Give yourself a hand. Holy mackerel. Sixer fans, rejoice. Your team has quit. You can try to now get into the lottery. The anti-processors, join us. The process is back. Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN. Yes, that was awful last night. I watched a lot of it. I did bail at some point at the end of the game. I just couldn't keep watching. Three-point barrage, Kevin Huter. He's like one of those guys that every time he faces you, he rips you, and then he faces other teams, and he's just okay. But my gosh, 7 threes in the game last night. The Sixers always seem to find the guy that stinks against everybody else, but he's like rips you. Who was the guy for the Celtics a couple of years ago? He'd play against the Sixers, and every time he played the Sixers, he hit all these threes, and then he hit more threes in one game than he would like added up the rest of the season. Who was the guy for Boston in the play? Kevin Huter last night had 23 points on 7 of 11 shooting. He was a plus 39. Zach Collins was a plus 41. I mean, they had a plus 40, a plus 28. Think about the numbers that the Bulls put up last night. Now, mind you, this is the Chicago Bulls, the team that if you were watching the start of the broadcast last night, that Kate Scott, opened up the broadcast last night by, there's a big playoff implication. Yeah, you're a game and a half behind the Bulls, for God's sakes, who were trying to lose. They traded away Zach LaVine. They didn't have their center last night, Vucevic, who did not play. So there's a Bulls team who's absolutely trying to vomit all over themselves, and they're up 50 on you last night. There was a time back in the process years that the Sixers had a loss. I'll never forget it. They're playing the San Antonio Spurs, and they got blasted by like 56 points or something like that. Maybe 50, 52, 55, whatever. It was in the 50s. They lost in the 50s to the San Antonio Spurs, and that was the loss that had the Sixers making change. The next thing you know, Jerry Colangelo's in charge. A couple weeks later, Sam Hinkie would write his manifesto and essentially get himself out of town. But it was that loss where it was like, okay, that's enough, right? There was a lot of people who around the NBA that hated what the Sixers were doing. And that loss on that night, they lost by over 50 to the San Antonio. You guys remember this loss? Do you remember the game I'm talking about? They lost the game to San Antonio by over 50 points. And at that moment, people are like, all right, this has gone too far. Was last night that kind of moment where you're like, all right, this has gone too far? Because you're watching that game last night, no fight, no effort, no nothing. And listen, you are playing a game last night with 2 players on the floor who have max contracts. All right, I get it. You're looking around, and some of the team is compromised. There's no Joel Embiid. But the game last night, Paul George is a max contract guy. Tyrese Maxey is a max contract guy. Kelly Oubre is a NBA rotational player. All right? They have guys on the floor last night that would play on every team in the league. Gershon Yabusele, I know he got hurt last night. He only played 13 minutes. Quentin Grimes has been a rotational player. Drummond's been an all-star. I mean, yes, the rest of this team is not very good. Totally understand. But to lose by 50 on your home floor last night, woof. Now, in that game against the San Antonio Spurs, right? You lose that game against the San Antonio Spurs, and it's like a 50-point loss. I got to find that loss. By the way, Josh has the day off today, so I'm kind of riding solo shotgun action at you. I got to try to find when that game was. I think it was I want to say Spurs-Sixers 2016 season. And they lose the game, here it is, 119-68 was the final score of that game, 119-68. And that was basically the night. That was the one where it was, okay, Jerry Colangelo is hired. He's the new whatever. The lineup in that game, you ready for this? Which team would win? The Sixers that night lost 119-68. This was their lineup. Robert Covington, Jeremy Grant, Nerlens Noel, T.J. McConnell, and Isaiah Cannon. Off the bench, you had Hollis Thompson, Rashawn Holmes, Jakar Sampson, Jaleel Okafor, Tony Roten, and Nick Stauskas. Christian Wood and Kendall Marshall did not play. Coach's decision. On that night, you shot 16% from three-point range. I bring that up because you look at the box score from last night, you were 10 of 40 from three-point range last night. 10 of 40. This team in 2016 was 4 of 24. At least they had the sense to stop chucking it up because they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. But it's not much different. 142-110 last night. And your lineup is Paul George, Gershon Yabusele, Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre Jr., Quentin Grimes. Off the bench, you had David Roddy, Andre Drummond, Adem Bona, Jared Butler, Jeff Doughton Jr., Lonnie Walker IV, and Ricky Council IV. I mean, it doesn't sound all that different from the type of lineup you had in that loss to the Spurs, 119-68. So on that night, 119-68, December 7th, 2017, there were some changes. They brought Jerry Colangelo in. Does Josh Harris watch that game last night and say, everything's good, stay the course? Does he watch that game last night, wake up today, and look at the standings and say, hey, we're right there. We might get Joel Embiid back. We're only 3 games out. Let's keep this thing together and keep pushing forward. We've lost 8 in a row, 9 out of 10. Everything seems to be okay. How if you own that team? How if you are a part of that organization? Is that game being received last night? Is that just a, hey, listen, we're down. It's a tough spot for us. We understand. It is what it is. Or is this a eye-opener? And I say franchise changer, but here's the problem. They have changed this franchise over and over and over and over so much. It's like, how many times can you keep changing this thing and then hope that one of these times hits? You know, we've talked a lot about the process, the non-process, what has happened, this has happened, that has happened. This is a team that has spent money. They have gone out and done everything that you possibly can. They've tried this guy and that guy. They've tried trades. They've tried free agency. They tried in the draft. They've hired different coaches who have won NBA championships. It's not for them being cheap. So what is it that has completely failed this organization? Because I know everybody wants to say, well, you know, I've heard so many people because the team stinks and they're playing at a process level. Heck, we ask you at Mike Gill Show on the X platform. Head on over there and vote right now because I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Which team did you enjoy more? The Sixers process teams or this current team right now. And honestly, right now, 94% say they enjoyed the process better than this team right now. That's what you've created. That is what you have created. So here's two problems. One, Joel Embiid can't stay healthy. That is one of the more obvious statements that we can make on the program, right? Joel Embiid cannot stay healthy. That we know. And for years, the beginning of a season has been, well, if Joel Embiid can just stay healthy. And it hasn't happened. Essentially in any of his seasons. Yes, he has appeared in playoff series, but generally never has he got to a playoff series the same version of himself. The second problem is he has a huge contract. So everybody wants to say you got to move on from Embiid. It's easier said than done. It is easier said than done. Joel Embiid's contract is essentially untradeable. I'm sorry to tell you, that's a big factor in all of this. So anything the Sixers do moving forward almost has to involve Joel. So you better embrace that instead of sitting here complaining and trying to find ways of getting rid of him, because that's not helping the fact that he will not be gone. Here is what Keith Pompey had to say about trading Joel Embiid.
Manager or president of basketball out there that's going to take on that contract. I mean, we're talking about a guy who only played in 19 games this season, and we're talking about you got 4 years left after it. So, I mean, we're saying sticking with him, but maybe they're stuck with him. It's not one of those contracts where you have a lot of like incentives to make, and he has a guaranteed deal. So I feel like the 76ers are stuck right now. I don't see a team willing to take that contract, at least not right now.
They are stuck with that deal. And he said, I don't see a team willing to take that contract, at least not right now, which means, yeah, maybe if he gets back out on the floor next season and shows that he can give me, 25 out of 30 games and he's back playing at an MVP level, and then you decide you want to trade him, okay, now we might be interested in him. But right now, you can't trade this guy. He can barely get up and down the floor, and he's got 4 years guaranteed. Look, I feel bad for Joel in the whole situation. I feel like he's kind of been villainized in this whole situation, and some of this is probably on him. I'm not taking all the blame away from him. But quite frankly, this is a guy who's 7'2", and big guys just don't stay healthy in this league, right? It's hard to put all your eggs in the big man basket, as we've seen over the years. I mean, Yao Ming was a great player, could not stay healthy, right? Look what's going on with already Wemby, 7'5". He can't stay healthy. He can't finish the season. There are tons of examples of big guys in this league who have broken down and haven't been able to play at the top level that you expect, and that stinks. It's unfortunate. 609-403-0973. Keith Pompey mentioned he thinks Embiid is untradeable at this moment. But how do the Sixers as an organization view him moving forward here? Do they still think that he is a guy that they can win with at the NBA level?
I mean, they still think that, they can make a run on this season, and they still think that, he could still play. They did have tests today. They're going to have more tomorrow, and it's going to basically determine the action that they go, the way that they go. But look, they have 5 tough games that they'll probably lose the next 5. And I honestly believe, like, if you lose the next 5 games, or if you lose the next 3 or 4, you might as well cancel Christmas and shut them down.
If they haven't already decided to shut him down, they need the next 5 games to determine that. They play the Knicks tomorrow night. You can listen to the game on 97.3 ESPN. By the way, they are currently 20-37. They are almost 20 games under 500. Their next 5 games, the one that Keith Pompey map out, Knicks loss, Golden State loss, Portland probably a loss, Minnesota loss. They play Boston again on the road. You think Boston, after losing to them at home on Christmas Day, wants to welcome them in with open arms and not blast them? Loss. Then you've got Utah, Atlanta, Toronto. I mean, who cares the rest of that? He's talking about those 5 games. Those 5 games shouldn't matter. They shouldn't matter. You shouldn't be evaluating what the team looks like after these 5 games. You need to evaluate the big picture here. And the big picture is this version of Embiid will not be good enough this year. But we've invested in 4 more years of Embiid. And to maximize those 4 years, we have to now cut the cord on this year. It's the only option. It's the only option. You can't sit here and say, you know what? Well, we might be in the play-in round if Embiid gets back on the floor at some point this season. Sure, can you catch the Bulls if Embiid plays at the highest level? Possibly, because they're not interested in winning either. You were just so bad the other night that they happened to ass backwards themselves into a victory. ESPN front office insider Bobby Marks said this about the Sixers' ability to trade Joel Embiid moving forward.
It's a little bit challenging to trade contracts. You know, somebody asked me, is he tradable? And I said, yeah, I mean, anybody's tradable. But for him, you would have at one time thought that you would be getting value in return if you ever did think about trading Joel Embiid. Now it's more of like, what do you have to include to basically get off the contract of Joel Embiid? Certainly a discussion for the offseason here as far as where he is, or maybe even next year health-wise here. But for at least now, you know, they're married to him.
Married to him. Now, I know a lot of marriages end up in divorce, right? The problem with this divorce is there's a lot of alimony payment. You would have to then basically take pennies on the dollar. So the question becomes, do you want to take your shot that Embiid can get healthy, play at an MVP level, and help this team win? Or do you want to trade him for pennies on the dollar and go through some pain for a couple of years? Because you're not getting, you know, when you trade a star player in the NBA, you don't get fair market value. I don't think the Sixers right now really look at this situation and say, yeah, we're in a great spot here. So if that's the case, you got to look at this situation and say, we're in a terrible spot. Let's just shut this season down and move on. The problem is you have so many games left. You have so many games left in the season. I mean, it's not like you have 10 games left. I mean, you got like 20 games left. And if you're a season ticket holder, you're sitting there last night, you're down by 50? You know, this should be where professional sports have some sort of decorum and say, our product was unacceptable. And because it was unacceptable, you are getting a refund. Because I, as the owner of that team, cannot endorse my product. You know, it's like when you go to a restaurant and you're like, hey, my meal was unacceptable. Like, I don't want to be the guy who complains, but, you know, look what you gave me here. I had some hair in this meal maybe, or, you know, it was so undercooked or so overcooked. And the restaurant owner says, you know what? That meal's on the house. It was subpar. It is not up to our restaurant standards, and therefore, it's on us. Please come back. We hope to do a better job. That's what professional sports teams need to start doing. That effort was subpar. It is not up to the standards that I, as the owner of this place, and I am giving you a refund. That's the way that these teams need to start acting if they're going to put that product out on the floor. A 50-point deficit to start the fourth quarter. You know what some people put out for those tickets? Disgraceful. Disgraceful last night. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. We're just getting started. Mike Gill in the Sports Bash. Your calls, texts, 609-403-0973. Flyers tonight taking on the Penguins. You can listen to that game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Hit the text board hard, will you? 609-403-0973. When we come back, we're going to the Combine. My guy Ric Serritella, the CEO of NFL Draft Bible, longtime draft guy. He is in Indianapolis at the Combine. Some of the top stories to watch this week. That's next. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. 2:26 coming up in just a couple of minutes. We'll talk a little football down at the Combine. Ric Serritella covers the NFL Draft. The Combine NFL Draft Bible will be live from the Combine. He'll tell us what to watch for this week. The Combine's underway. Mel Kiper's mock draft is up at 97.3 ESPN.com. What the Eagles could do with pick 32. You know, pick 32 sounds like one of those things, but you got Nolan Smith late in the draft. And look, the NFL draft is different than the NBA. You can get a guy in the first round. What positions got some depth? We'll talk to Rick about that coming up in just a little bit. Plus, the quarterbacks at the top of this draft. If you're a fan of the draft, when you got big quarterback names in there, this one's an interesting year. You got Shedeur Sanders at the top of that list, Cam Ward. A couple of years ago, the quarterback draft, the one that I guess a couple years ago was like 10 years ago now, right? Like Geno Smith, that crew. Didn't love that draft class. I'm not a big fan of swinging for a quarterback in the draft. Like I hate these teams that are so desperate that go out there and try to take a swing for a quarterback. And inevitably, a lot of these guys, nobody took a huge swing. I get it. Kansas City traded up to get Patrick Mahomes, but they got him at the 10 spot. They didn't make a complete crazy move to draft him number 1 or number 2. If there's a guy there that you like, take him. But don't go crazy trying to get these guys. Looking at the Mel Kiper mock draft over at ESPN.com right now, he's got Abdul Carter, the kid from Penn State, going number 1. He's got Cam Ward going number 2 to the Browns. Like, the Browns are one of those teams, man. They just keep swinging for quarterbacks and missing and missing and missing. You feel bad for them almost. But this is a year where you're bad, and there's not a great quarterback in this draft class that I think, anyway. We'll see what Rick thinks coming up in just a couple of minutes from now here on the Sports Bash Live. The Giants, he's got taking Travis Hunter. Will Campbell, an offensive lineman, number 4 to the Patriots. Mason Graham, defensive tackle, going to Jacksonville. Genty, the running back, going to the Raiders at number 6. Shedeur Sanders, quarterback, to the Jets. And you're in the same situation where you're the Jets. You need a quarterback. If you like Sanders, I guess you take him there. If he falls to you at 7, if you're in love with the guy. But don't do something crazy. These teams all do something crazy. They trade up. They trade picks. They trade the whole franchise to get a player that generally, how many of these guys over the last couple of years do you feel like, look at Green Bay. They got Jordan Love. They didn't do something crazy to get him. He was there late in the first round. They took him. They didn't do anything crazy to go get him, and it works out for them. Some of these teams, they just do crazy stuff at draft. I love the draft process. I love the draft time of the year. This is a big week. We'll talk to Adam Caplan from football at 4. Today, he will be joining us live from the Combine as well, and we will get some insight on him. There's also some interesting insight we're going to get into Jeremy Fowler. I don't know if you guys saw him this morning. He was on Get Up, and part of the segment was about what will happen with Myles Garrett. So Myles Garrett obviously has requested to be traded. Here is what Jeremy Fowler had to say earlier today. Now, he was on Get Up, and he was asked about essentially, I guess if Garrett requested a trade, just to give you guys the background on it. Garrett requested a trade back on February 3rd. They have told basically people that, no, we're not interested in trading him. We're not going to trade him, the Browns. In fact, the GM, Andrew Berry, who used to work with the Eagles, he came out today and said, no, we're not interested in trading him. So he essentially says, we're not interested in trading him. But what if Myles Garrett just refuses to play? Well, here is what Jeremy Fowler said today on Get Up.
We could have a market here with a couple teams.
Okay, and then tell me why I should be thinking about Myles Garrett on the Eagles.
So way early, I'm connecting some dots here, admittedly, but this is a conversation that some people in the league have had, that the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the most aggressive, if not the most aggressive teams on the trade market, will be looking for a pass rusher. Josh Sweat, the Super Bowl likely or close MVP, could be out. The expectation is that he will sign elsewhere, so they're going to have a need there. Myles Garrett, They would not want to see him go to the Washington Commanders, for example. If that was to gain traction, Howie Roseman would likely step in, try to make a deal that is too hard for the Cleveland Browns to refuse.
All right, there you go. That is earlier today from Jeremy Fowler. If they want to trade Garrett and Washington got involved, that Howie Roseman would say, no. Listen to my deal first, and then he would step in. More on that coming up, but right now, let's go to the NFL Combine news and notes. Ric Serritella is the CEO of NFL Draft Bible All Access, and he joins me now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Draft season again, my friend. What's going on?
Yes, sir. What's happening, Mike Gill? I know it's draft season when I get the call for the Sports Bash, the often imitated, never duplicated Sports Bash, I should add.
Well, we're ready to go for the draft season, and a couple things. The Combine starts this week. You were down at Senior Bowl, all these preseason bowl games getting ready for this process. So how has this process changed? How has it materialized to where we are in 2025 from when you kind of started doing this?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just go back not even 10 years ago when Christian McCaffrey was making headlines opting out of the bowl game, and what a big deal that was. And now that's kind of par for the course. You see the superstars, just about all of them opt out of these bowl games if they're not in the college football playoff. And a lot of them are opting out of the Combine. I think now what you're starting to see, especially in recent years, the trend is if you're a top 10 pick or you're a top quarterback in the draft, why participate at the NFL Scouting Combine? What do you have to gain, outside of the team interviews and the medical, which is vital? But, Abdul Carter will not work out. Ashton Genty will not work out. We know Shedeur Sanders will not throw. And I don't think any of these guys have anything to gain by participating in these workouts. And it's something for the NFL to keep in mind, Mike, because, the Combine, there's a lot of talk about moving it, and they are there in Indianapolis through 2026. But if the NFL ever moves away from Indianapolis, you're starting to see some of these younger GMs and players skip the Combine. I'm telling you what, you're going to see more players even opt out of the Combine should they move this to different cities or have it at multiple cities, which one NFL executive told me might be the case.
We know that quarterbacks run the roost. So, Ric Serritella, give us your overview of this quarterback class, which is headlined by Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Are they your two favorites? How do you look at those two? Is there a third, fourth guy in your mix?
Well, I do think Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado, Cam Ward out of Miami are two franchise signal callers in this year's draft, right? If they get selected in the right scheme, the right system, the continuity, I think they can be successful. I think they can lead a team to the Super Bowl. They're that talented. Where do they stack compared to last year's draft class? Probably somewhere in the middle of the pack. I don't think they would have been better than Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. I don't think they would have been below Bo Nix or the kid from Michigan, J.J. McCarthy. So I think they would have been somewhere in the middle compared to last year's draft. I like Shedeur Sanders more. I think he's a very mature guy, opposite of what the knock has been on him in terms of his character. I think he's very accountable. I think he raises the level of competition around him. He turned around the Jackson State and Colorado programs. He holds on to the football a little bit longer now, Mike, but he doesn't throw turnovers. He doesn't commit turnovers. He doesn't throw interceptions. He had no offensive line. He had a very poor running game. I believe Shedeur Sanders will be a better pro than he was collegiate player. As for Cam Ward, if I went back on New Year's Day, I watched all Cam Ward's touchdown passes. I watched all Shedeur Sanders' touchdown passes. If I were to take the top 10 plays from all those throws, they might all 8 of them, maybe all 10 of them might have been from Cam Ward. But when you talk about the consistency, I just like the consistency of Shedeur Sanders more. So Cam Ward reminds me a little bit of E.J. Manuel, where you saw a lot of big splash plays on the film. But you know what? It might get you a little bit overexcited from down in and down out. I think Shedeur Sanders is the better overall quarterback. Now, I do think you might see a third quarterback, not only in the first round, but maybe creep inside the top 10. Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, have your choice of the litter, but I do think it's possible.
Well, there you go. So you mentioned a lot of people look at this. How many quarterback deeps is this draft class? So you think there could be 3 or 4 guys possibly, because that changes the dynamics for teams like Philadelphia down at the back end. When teams take those quarterbacks and you don't need one, they start to drop more talent to the back end of the draft, and teams like Philly prosper when teams take a shot on a quarterback.
That's right. And if I'm not mistaken, I do believe the Lamar Jackson draft was the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl and they traded to Baltimore at 32. Was you got to double check me on that, but if that were,
I think you're right. They had 32. They traded back. They took, I think they took Goddard in the second round, and Baltimore took Jackson.
So here's a team to keep an eye on for this year. How about the Raiders? What are they at, number 6 or number 7? They might miss out on a first-round quarterback. Well, they did hire Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly came over from Ohio State. Could Will Howard maybe be a target for the Raiders to slide up in there? You know, Pete Carroll took over Seattle. He drafted a quarterback. He signed the kid Flynn. He drafted Russell Wilson. I could see the same kind of formula occurring in Las Vegas.
Ric Serritella is with us. NFL Draft Bible, Combine, draft season is underway. Overall, you know, every year people have their thoughts of the draft class, stars, starters. How do you look at this particular class? Because you're a team like Philly who has drafted very well. You know, Roseman got a lot of misses early in his career. Now he's on the hit train, man. Easier to hit when you have more talent. So what do you think of the depth of this particular class?
Yeah, and before we get to the depth, I mean, if you go back and just look at the first 3 picks of the last 5 drafts, like Howie Roseman has not missed. I mean, he has been great money there on the first and second and third rounds. In terms of this draft, Mike, it's not as star-laden. You know, the blue chippers, you've got, you know, a lot on defense with Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham in that order.
Do you look at Hunter as a defensive player? Because I saw Andrew Berry, I think today, said they view him as a wide receiver. Do you think he's both, one or the other? What do you think about him?
Well, first of all, let's not listen to Ivy League guys when it comes to football evaluations. Andrew Berry, go back to your analytics guy and, you know, let's watch some film. I mean, Travis Hunter's a cornerback all day. There's no questions about it. He's got elite instincts. He's just a natural corner, not so much as a polished route runner. He's a guy that can create in space. He's not going to be your wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, but yet, you know, definitely get him in space, let him get back there, return a punt when you need to flip the field or something like that. But Andrew Berry, he's out there throwing smokes. It's smoke screen season. He's trying to throw some games out there. That Andrew Berry, very, very funny, Andrew.
Well, all right, let you then continue on the depth of this draft, some of the guys you like.
Yeah, no, I like Mason Graham. I think he's a blue chip caliber guy. Abdul Carter is really kind of reminds me of Von Miller, where I thought Von Miller was undersized. Then he gets drafted by Denver. They plugged him into the 43. Later in his career, he played the 34. I could see Abdul Carter having that kind of versatility. And then, you know, Jedi Barron, the Thorpe Award winner, you know, he's a little bit undersized at like 5'10" and change, Mike, but this guy's coverage ability is elite. I mean, this Jedi Barron, I love him a lot. Tyler Warren out of Penn State, the tight end, I think he's a top 5 talent in my book. You saw what Brock Bowers, different kind of player, but you saw the kind of dynamic that Bowers brought to that offense at the tight end position. I really do believe Tyler Warren is that kind of guy. And how about this? You know, somebody who doesn't get talked about a lot. We saw the impact and the value of running backs this past season. Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. Remember that name, because this guy, he can run, he can catch, he can block, he can do it all. He has size.
Because everybody's talking about Genty, right? So where do you project him? Is the running back enough where he's a top 10 pick, or is that a reach?
I got to be honest, Mike. Like, Ashton Genty didn't play a top 25 ranked defense all season. The last game of the season, the 25th ranked UNLV Rebels. I mean, this guy beat up on the Mountain West. He played a real defense in Penn State in that college football playoffs. That 7.3 yards per carry average went right down to 3.3. or 3.0 in that game. And so I have my questions. Then you look at a guy like Cam Scatterbo. I mean, he ran over and through and around that Texas Longhorns defense. I felt like Scatterbo blew it because he had an invite to the Senior Bowl. He could have went down to Mobile and really staked his claim as the running back one, I thought. And he had all that momentum and just blew it. I think the combine will dictate where he goes because everybody wants to see his timed speed. But I wouldn't be surprised, like if Scatterbo or Amarian Hampton or even one of these Ohio State running backs, I really like Judkins, turned out to be the best running back in this year's draft.
All right, let me get a couple quick thoughts from Ric Serritella, the CEO of NFL Draft Bible. Combine season all week in Indianapolis. Eagles 32. We know what they like to take. They got 4 key free agents. So let's look at those spots. Defensive tackle, 32. Is that a good spot?
Oh, it's a great spot for defensive tackles. I mean, the defensive tackle class is just locked. It's loaded. I mean, you got Walter Nolan, actually. There are some character concerns around this young man. He was a top standout at the Senior Bowl and somebody who could slide down to Philadelphia. So if he's there, defensive tackle, Walter Nolan is a guy that could fall into the Philadelphia Eagles. I heard the snippet you played about Myles Garrett. And James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee is an edge rusher now who's had some character concerns. There's some concerns about his character and his locker room presence. Is he a violent kind of guy? Well, I like my edge rushers to be a little bit violent, but you saw Howie with Jalen Carter, not afraid to roll the dice. James Pierce Jr. is a guy I could see the Eagles possibly target to replace a Josh Sweat, for example. So defensive tackles, I mean, Mike, this is one of the most talented defensive tackle classes I've seen. I'm trying to pull up my board in front of me because the list goes on and on and on, but it's such a great year. I mean, when you talk about Derek Harmon from Oregon, Kenneth Grant from Michigan, Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, all these guys would be in play. I'll give you a day 2 guy that I really like, Cam Jackson out of Florida. This guy's like a 375-pound Mack truck. He's just a body mover and eats space, and I really like him a lot. I think he's a plug-and-play starter. Defensive tackles, edge rushers, they're loaded.
Yeah, I like Kenneth Grant, Michigan, too, by the way. You just said edge rushers, too, because they lose Josh Sweat. That's another spot Howie would generally look to. Right guard, they might lose Becton, but they have Steen. Do they look to try to replace some talent there? Probably not in the first round. And they got Zach Baun. If you lost a linebacker, they took Dean in the 3rd round a couple of years ago. I wonder if if Baun leaves, would they have to look at the draft to replace him? And we know Dean has an injury problem right now.
Yeah, and, Jack Kaiser is a guy from Notre Dame that could be had in the middle rounds, and I think he's going to start and hang out in the NFL for a long time. And you talk about the pass coverage, Jack Kaiser was like one of the best defenders in pass coverage at the Senior Bowl. I was really impressed with him. We saw what he could do sideline to sideline, plug in the gap, tackle machine at Notre Dame. But I was impressed with his pass coverage, a well-rounded guy who also brings 962 snaps. Yes, double check that. 962 career snaps on special teams, that Jack Kaiser.
All right, man. Well, it's just day 2 of the Combine, but draft season is officially here, which means we'll hear more from Ric Serritella, and you should definitely make sure that you follow along as the draft process is here. Ric Serritella, the CEO of NFL Draft Bible, doing a lot of good stuff. You, Baldinger, it's a busy time at Ric Serritella on the X platform. Busy week for you, I'm sure. Thanks for a couple moments, man.
Appreciate you, Mikey.
All right, see, there he goes, Ric Serritella, everybody, and we'll be talking to him a lot during the draft process here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. Coming up, so much more, including we'll dive into why I think Jeremy Fowler's comments, which we played a little while ago, make some sense. We'll get into that. Your text messages continue to come in, 609-403-0973. I see a bunch of them. In that last segment alone, we got like over 35 texts I need to get to. So I'll read them, rip them, come up, react. That's coming up. Plus the Phillies mailbag with Frank Klose. Adam Caplan's at the Combine today. Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman both talking today. Howie Roseman making a key comment. We'll hear from him coming up later. Football at 4, Knicks Nuggets, Ryer Sigh. Don't go away. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. All right, 251 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. A lot of text messages coming in on the Sixers debacle, 609-403-0973. My suggestion, like when you go to a restaurant and you get a bad meal and the restaurant owner says, hey, we'll comp your meal. I feel that the team needs to say to the season ticket holders last night and the people who bought tickets for that game, we will comp your tickets. When you go to a restaurant and the meal's unacceptable, you say, that was not up to our standards. I'm sorry. The meal's on me. Please come back. We'll do better next time. It is incumbent on the owner to say, that is not up to our standards. Please come back. I'll do better next time. And if I don't do better, here is you're being refunded. Because if you have to keep refunding the fans because of the lack of effort, you will get so mad if it continues to happen that things will start to change. People will start to not be able to be here any longer. That's the groundswell that needs to occur. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Rick in EHT says, Mike, I totally agree. Not sure what the Sixers are doing here. Shut him be down immediately. If you think he has a chance to return this year, what's the best case scenario? Do they actually think they can compete? Absolute dumpster fire. Here's what I will say, Rick. The one problem we have had now as fans, it's either, my buddy John McMullen likes to say this all the time. It's the Ricky Bobby rules. If you're not first, you're last. We either want to be first or last. That's the fans' mentality. The organization is filled with professionals, right? They have professional players who they're saying, listen, we want to compete for a championship, or at least we hope they have that mentality. So I understand if their mentality is, hey, listen, we got a chance to win, make the playoffs, but in the big picture, it's not prudent for them to keep doing this with the way that guy is walking up and down the court. Last year, yeah, he got back, he tried to play, he was out on the floor, and you gave it a shot because you had a competitive team that deserved that shot. This team here, they don't deserve that shot. Not after last night, they don't. Mike, has Joel put in the work it takes to be in top shape? The answer is no. He's a disappointment that will never pay dividends, Tom and Summers' point. I don't think that's fair, Tom, but could he be in better shape? I've been the first person that says he needs to lose about 30 pounds, but he's a big man who's been hurt a lot. I mean, to say that, I feel like people just like to pile on Joel because, hey, he's the best player. You're disappointed. But some of the stuff is just not fair. Coming up next, the Phillies put out an interesting lineup yesterday. The mailbag is next. All right, 3 o'clock Sports Bash this hour brought to you by Broadlee's Plumbing Heating. Call 609-390-3907, broadlees.net. Mike Gill, Sports Bash. Phillies in action currently, 3-3 in the 6th. Now, their lineup today, not nearly as news-making as their lineup yesterday. Rojas, Marsh, Sosa, Stevenson, Buddy Kennedy. He's a little news-making. We can get into that. Stubbs, Miller, interesting. Crawford, fun. And some guy named Kemp played first base today. Sanchez, 2 innings, 3 strikeouts. Heard good stuff about him. Hit 97, 98 on the gun. Everybody else that pitched today, and Franken can correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine none of them have a shot to make the roster. So there's that. He joins us now on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, as the Phillies continue spring training. We've got the Phillies mailbag for you here, and Frank Klose is there, and he joins us now on a Tuesday afternoon coming off of a rainout yesterday. Frank, would you agree that yesterday's batting order was maybe the biggest story so far of the spring?
I might say so. Now, I think it's worth noting that Bryce Harper was not going to play in that lineup, but you did see Trey Turner leading off, and you saw Kyle Schwarber batting second. I think that lineup is kind of a hint at kind of where they're going, but I do believe that Bryce Harper would be the number 2 hole and Kyle Schwarber a little further back, probably 4.
So yesterday, yes, Schwarber goes 2, Harper goes 3. You don't think that will be the opening day lineup? It's just one of the, Rob Thompson has said he wants to try different lineups. So you ultimately think that's just, hey, let's just see what this one looks like today.
Yeah, I think sometimes when they set up these spring games, it's so that the certain players get a certain number of at-bats and then get out of there. So I think by stacking them all 3 in a row, it was just a way to sort of get them their at-bats and get them out. But I think you'll see Bryce Harper in that 2 spot and Kyle Schwarber a little far back, hopefully with the right-handed bat in between them, maybe Alec Boehm if all things work out. But yeah, sometimes in the spring, these lineups shouldn't be taken too seriously this early. A lot of times it's just get your work in, get those at-bats first in the order, and then by the time they come around the third time, somebody else is in there. So I think for us to really read into it, we need to get to maybe week 3 or 4 of spring training and kind of see what it looks like when everybody is playing and everybody is gearing up closer to the season, not in the get your at-bats and then get out of here kind of mold.
All right, Christopher Sanchez went today, 2 innings, 3 strikeouts. The reports on him were good. What's your outlook for Sanchez this season? He kind of came out of nowhere last year as a very dependable, reliable guy. In years past, he was very green, kind of raw, had some control issues. So what is your outlook for Sanchez, who looked really good in his spring debut?
A lot of credit to the Phillies coaching staff there for someone like him. The Phillies traded for him from the Rays, who he was facing today, of course, kind of with the idea that this was somebody who was raw, that had high velocity, and can we make him into a pitcher? It was kind of the philosophy that they had when they got Jose Alvarado, also from the Rays. But the thought was, yeah, we can make something out of him. And Caleb Cotham, give him a lot of credit for the work that he is doing. And then the Phillies organization as a whole, their pitching philosophy has been absolutely wonderful in bringing guys along. So I think that this year, I think because he did figure it out last year, I think the big challenge this year is going to be that there are some adjustments that the league is going to try to make to him. And I think that the story of his 2025 will be, can he therefore make adjustments back? And I think we've seen with a lot of players in the major leagues, they get off to the hot start, and then the league learns how to adjust to them. The difference with Christopher Sanchez, though, is he kind of adjusted into last year. And so we'll see what the league has to say to how he did last year. They've got a lot of tape on him. They can do a lot to see how that they can hit him going into next year. But he is indeed one of those big success stories that the Phillies have. Again, great work from Caleb Cotham. And they're going to really miss Brian Caplan, who ended up joining the Arizona Diamondbacks this year to be their pitching coach. He had a big hand in that too. So he got a promotion. You can't have them both as the head pitching coach, but he was really good for the Phillies the last several years working with Caleb Cotham.
All right, Frank Klose covers the Phillies, 97.3 ESPN.com. I want to go through the lineup a little bit today and have some questions on some of these guys. Let's start with Buddy Kennedy. He was at third base today. He played first the other day. He was at second. Now he's at third. Reports that he was working out in the outfield with Mike Trout all offseason long. I guess it seems it's pretty realistic that he will make this team as the last guy and kind of super utility player.
Yeah, that's kind of what he's going for. Now, the unfortunate thing for Weston Wilson is he strained his oblique, and the problem with those oblique injuries is you can't do anything until it gets a chance to heal, and if you start up too early, you can damage it all over again and make it even worse. So Weston Wilson is not going to be able to be on the Phillies opening day roster, so that opens up perhaps another spot for somebody like Kennedy. And as you said, he's worked out with Mike Trout in the offseason, a Millville boy himself. From what I understand, they've known each other since Kennedy was 13 and Trout was 20. But that versatility that you just talked about is going to be the key to having Kennedy on the roster. He's probably not going to make it for his bat in that he's basically hit around the 200 mark in his career for the various organizations he's been a part of along the way. And, mainly in the major leagues with the Arizona Diamondbacks. But he's kind of somebody who to be on this roster needs to be able to play third base as he did today. Needs to be able to play some outfield. Needs to be able to play some second base. And especially when the Phillies devote a position to a full-time DH in Kyle Schwarber, though he might play some left field, they're essentially devoting a spot on the roster to a straight DH. So that last roster spot and the versatility that the player brings is more important than ever. So I think he's got a real shot to make this team. I think that he is somebody that they're going to be looking at closely this spring to show that he can play the positions, and hopefully his bat come around a little bit too. So he doesn't, again, historically have much to show for in terms of his batting average, but this is a real opportunity to show that he belongs, and they're going to give them the opportunity for him to show that he belongs.
Yeah, another interesting part of the lineup today was Miller Crawford batting back-to-back at the bottom of the order, shortstop and left field. And obviously those two young guys, everybody wants to kind of see them. What is your outlook for those two guys this year?
Yeah, they made the trip to Northport, which is my least favorite road trip when I'm down at spring training. So they sent the young guys there, gave them that opportunity. And of the two, I think they're both probably going to start at Double-A Reading. Of the two, I think Crawford's further along. Crawford had more experience at Double-A than Miller did last year. Miller had a cup of coffee like the last week, and that was about it. But I think that both of them have the chance to rise up through the system. Relatively short order. I think it's reasonable to think that Miller doesn't make the major leagues this year. He is an infielder. The Phillies have plenty of infielders unless there's an injury. He probably is going to not make the major leagues. But Crawford, I really like. By the way, one of the things you saw from Crawford today, and I'm sure you could find somebody on social media to show you a clip of it, but he's pretty fast, and his base running ability was showcased today in Northport against the Rays. So I think Crawford, because of his speed, because of his defense, and because of the fact that the Phillies outfield is probably the easier thing to crack, I think that he has a shot to move up to AAA this season and maybe even get a chance to taste the major leagues later on this season. There's a history of players making the postseason roster for their speed. He might be the kind of guy that has that role heading into the playoffs if he can really demonstrate that he can really use his speed. And pretty good defensive center fielder. The Phillies have sort of had that carousel of center fielders in recent years. He could claim center field even down the stretch if he puts together a good season. So I'm really interested in seeing what Crawford does. Now, looking at a lot of the prospect rankings, a lot of them have Miller in a category above Crawford, but in terms of who can make the major leagues first and who might fit a more immediate need, I think Crawford could be the guy that does that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do in this spring, and then when he reports to the minor leagues this season.
Yeah, you got Rojas, who can't play the field yet. He DH'd today. You got Marsh, who played today. Cal Stevenson, a left-handed bat. So not as much competition in the outfield. Therefore, it could clear the way for Crawford a little bit sooner. All right, let's get into some mailbag questions here. Skip wants to know, would you sign JT Realmuto to an extension? That ties into a question because Stubbs was in the lineup today. I want to get your thoughts on the catching position this year, the backup, how that's all going to play out, and then how that factors into this question from Skip.
Yeah, all eyes are on Rafael Marchand this spring. Can he stay healthy? That seems to be the big question about him. The Phillies really have liked his tools. But if you're a team that's going to win and expects to win, you can't go into a season with a catcher that you don't know if you can count on or not. Now, the question about Real Muto, I think that's how well Marchand does might actually play into this because, Real Muto is, of course, still one of the more productive catchers in the game when he's healthy. A lot of players that play the catching position that can hit, they move out of that catching position, right? Bryce Harper was a catcher. Kyle Schwarber was a catcher. Going further back, they took Craig Biggio out from behind the plate. Carlos Santana was a catcher. They moved him from out behind the plate. So it's hard to find a catcher with a bat. And Real Muto, of course, was one of the best ones in the game going forward. Now, for me, the question of whether you bring him back depends on positional flexibility, because JT Real Muto cannot catch 140 games a year again. They really need to get him out from behind the plate more often. And then the question is, if you sign somebody like him to an extension, he is the oldest player on the Phillies roster. Are you going to be able to put him anywhere else on the days that he is not catching? Now, I think one of the big questions that's wrapped up with this question is whether or not Kyle Schwarber gets re-signed, because both of them kind of profile as designated hitters. Kyle Schwarber is probably going to play some more left field this year. That's kind of the early word out of camp. And so could the Phillies handle both of them on the roster at the same time? Now, I don't really like the idea of Real Muto in left field. I think he's a better fit at first base or maybe serving as a designated hitter once in a while. But when you have too many players that are expecting to use that DH slot, it's kind of hard to juggle. So I will say this. If you look at the Phillies long-term at the catching position, one of their best prospects is a catcher, Eduardo Tate, but he's also 18 years old and probably not going to make the Phillies anytime soon. In fact, that you saw that the Phillies, when they made that Jesus Luzardo trade, they also got back a catcher in that deal, Paul McIntosh, who is maybe not necessarily much of a prospect at this point. I mean, he's 27 years old, but it shows that the Phillies recognize they need some catching depth. And it's that lack of catching depth that could let the Phillies bring him back for a year or two. I don't know how long-term you want to go with somebody like Real Muto after this year, but a good catcher is hard to find in this game. If you look at who's going to be a free agent from the catching position going into next year, there's really not a lot out there. A lot of them are older players, not starting catchers. So if you bring him back, I think you need to make sure that you have another landing spot for him somewhere on the roster. And that's going to be the kind of tough question now. So again, both he and Kyle Schwarber free agents to be. I think that will come into play here, what the other one's going to do. But also, too, if Rafael Marchand shows that he can play 2 days a week, no problem, or if he needs to fill in for an extended period of time and does it well, the Phillies might be more confident on having a Real Muto that can't catch as much. So it's a really hard question to answer. Obviously, a fan favorite, obviously traditionally been one of the most productive catchers in the game, but we already saw he had the knee injury last year. You can't defy Mother Nature, right? So there's not a history of catchers playing until they're 40. So
Father Time.
Yeah, exactly. Father Time. Excuse me. Yeah. So Father Time will get
or
in the way.
Mother Nature when she feels like dumping rain on you, you get your game canceled. But yeah, Father Time.
Yeah. But there's a reason people our age don't play anymore, Mike.
Yes, indeed. But let's go the opposite direction of Father Time. So some of the younger players, Wayne wants to know, who's this Gabriel Rincones? Is he much of a prospect? Jacking a homer the other day, big guy. You hear a lot about Miller and Crawford, but is this someone we should keep an eye on? Gabriel Rincones.
Yes, Rincones certainly got fans' attention in that first televised game on Sunday, went deep to left field, and he's somebody that's viewed as having a lot of power. Now, I say somebody viewed as, now he did play college, but the Phillies drafted him back in 2022 in the third round. He was productive when he was on the field, but when you go back to 2022, he couldn't play the rest of that year because when the Phillies drafted him, he was injured. And then he had another injury last season, which meant that he was limited to 59 games. But if you look at his numbers in 59 games, he had 11 home runs and he had an 800 OPS. So when you look at where he kind of fits in the prospect rankings, at the end of last year with the MLB pipeline, he was the number 10 Phillies prospect. Right now, he's kind of treated as like a fourth-tier prospect on other prospect ranking sites, but what they say about him is he's got power. They agree on that. They kind of like his arm, but they kind of wonder also if he can be someone who plays every day in the major leagues or if he has to be a platoon player. They might think he might be a first baseman rather than a corner outfielder. So I think there's a lot for him to show. He is older. He is, I believe, 24 years old next week, actually. And so he's going to have to show that bat is going to play in the major leagues and also that he has a position. So again, we just said that there might be some room in the outfield. Certainly Max Kepler only on a 1-year deal, but Rincones needs to show that he can, 1, play the field, 2, play every day, and kind of 3, stay healthy. He just has a small sample size so far. So he's probably not in that top prospect category, but he is one of their top 10 prospects, and his story is that power. So we'll see where he goes. Probably also going to start at Double-A this season. They can have a nice Double-A roster to start the season. So we'll keep an eye on him and his power and whether his glove is kind of coming into its own. But the small sample size so far, having only played 23 season and some of 24.
Yeah, you got a lot of those young guys. I would imagine. Now, where do you think a guy like Abel, McGriff? You think McGarry? I should say Griff, McGarry. Are those guys Double-A, Triple-A? I mean, where are those guys at now?
Well, I think they're probably both Triple-A pitchers. They kind of showed they could pitch in Double-A, and then the Triple-A is where they started having some pushback. Mick Abel in particular, I don't want to say he's not a prospect anymore. He's probably not a top prospect. I think right now he's considered a prospect because people like the tools that he has, but he hasn't really been able to put it together at AAA. So in fact, even last year at one point, they just hit the pause button on Mick Abel and gave him a breather at the I think he's on the development list for a week or two just to sort of catch his breath. So it's kind of make or break for Abel. I mean, they have more time before they'd have to call him up and make a final decision on whether or not he's going to make the major leagues. But Mick Abel kind of had a lost 2024 in some ways, wasn't able to get it together. But if he'll be if he's finding success in AAA, he would be on the short list to come up because there's never enough pitching. You always got to dip to the minor leagues for a starter, even if it's just for rain out turn doubleheader. So I think he's got a shot to make it. And McGarry, his profile certainly decreased, even taking him off the roster at one point. So. But I think they still believe in him. And again, he's got to show that he can do it at AAA before that they can make any commitments to him. So, this is a story of a lot of things. This is a performance-based job, and McGarry's going to really have to show that he does belong on the Phillies roster once again. And, it might be a little humbling that nobody really picked him up because when you're designated for assignment, anybody can claim you, right? So when he was outrighted to AAA. So, we'll see. He was just so last year in the minor leagues. He's going to have to write his own ticket with solid performance.
All right, Frank, let's get to another mailbag question from one of the listeners out there. A good one from Jane. Who's your bounce-back candidate this year on the Phillies? Now, that's a tough one because not a lot of guys had, dreadful years. It just felt like there was a lot of guys who had just kind of mediocre or good years. No one had an MVP year. So maybe in the pitching department. So I'm interested to see who some of your candidates are here.
Well, the two I considered to answer the question, the first would have been Bryson Stott, who we learned earlier this spring had a little bit of an elbow issue last year. He didn't have the season that a lot of us thought that he would have last year, but I went with Jose Alvarado. Definitely a down season for him. 2-5 with a 4.09 ERA in 66 games, but I think having the offseason, having to hit the reset button is going to be good for him. We see throughout baseball, a lot of these high leverage relievers, they have up and down seasons. And 2022, he was lights out and really he was the one that put the Phillies on his back and led them into the playoffs and all the way to the World Series. So I think when you look at someone like him, his sinker is really his signature pitch. And the encouraging thing for me is his velocity has generally remained the same, which made me think that he just got out of his mechanics just a little bit. Getting those swings and misses on that sinker was really big for Alvarado's game. And if you compare 2024 and 2022, the whip was about the same, walks and hits for each innings pitched. So, if you really zoom in on last season, his toughest time went from late July into August, ended up having an 8.39 ERA and in the month of August and a 309 on base average against him. And we kind of saw him get a little bit better going into September. Now, of course, after that rough August, he was used in lower leverage situations. So, but he did have a 2.89 ERA his last 10 games. He did strike out 11 in those in the month of September and 9 in the third inning. So I think that especially now with Jeff Hoffman moving on, with Carlos Estevez moving on, he's going to find himself having some more high leverage situations again. And if he gets those mechanics back in order, which I think he could, or he showed signs of late in the season, I think he'll be back to his old self. So I think lots to be said for his velocity still being there, because then you think, all right, tweak your mechanics, you can get yourself back. So I think Jose Alvarado could have a really good year again.
That would be big. That bullpen, I think a lot of people think downgraded as opposed to got better. We'll see. I think a lot. Jordan Romano, if he's the guy that he was in Toronto 2 and 3 years ago, really good. Last year, not so good. You need a big step forward from Kerkering. Strom, you would hope that he's as good. I mean, to ask him to be as good as he was last year, I think is going to be a lot to ask. He was super good last year, and Alvarado was up, down, all around last year. I think they lost confidence in him in the playoffs, so getting a bounce-back year from him would be a really good one as well. Is there any young arm or somebody that maybe isn't on the team that could help this team at some point?
There's really not a lot of openings. Even with all the names that we mentioned, they still have the likes of like Tanner Banks on the roster, right? And the AAA kind of pitchers like the Max Lazars and Michael Mercados are going to be kind of at that AAA level, trying to show what they can do for the opportunity to come up. So I think it would be good to see if either Lazar or Mercado can sort of develop a little bit. Tyler Phillips, another name, is somebody who did have some major league time and could use some more development. Perhaps he'll be around to call up. But a lot of them, it's the Phillies have taken in a lot of I would say like quadruple A type players, just to see who might step up. That Alan Rangel, who was there in camp, was in AAA last year. Kind of had a good enough season that they thought that they wanted to take a look at him in spring training. So I think at the AAA level, I think going into this year, perhaps unlike last year, there's probably a good 3, 4, maybe even 5 of them that might be a AAA that you won't feel so bad if you need to call upon them at a certain point. No one at AAA, kind of the top prospect kind of. Well,
that's
pitcher,
what McGarry is supposed to. He's pitching today, actually. He's supposed to be that kind of guy that was the young, maybe arm that could give you a little, pizzazz at the back end of a bullpen. The kid McMillan came in yesterday throwing 100 cheese.
Yeah, but there's a lot of players in Major League Baseball now that throw hard. And if you look at the average velocity across baseball, it's up. So I think the real challenge is who can get good command of those pitches and make them do something, because everybody is throwing hard. And there's even guys like Kyle Tyler that pitched for Miami last year briefly that the Phillies claimed. I mean, they have a lot of inventory of players that could be useful stopgaps. And I guess the hope is one of them can really step up and really show that they belong in the major leagues.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com, early stages of spring training, and the Phillies, of course, have a long way to go, but not a lot of roster decisions. They need to stay healthy, as the one thing they will try to figure out, their batting lineup. We'll see what that ends up being, and Frank, of course, talked about that. And the mailbag each and every week right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, there's Frank, and, of course, he's back every week with the Phillies mailbag. You can get your Phillies mailbag questions at Frank Klose on the X platform and listen to see if we answer your questions. And, as always, you can text in your questions for Frank live and in real time at 609-403-0973. A lot of Phils there, but on the other side, will the Eagles make a trade to obtain Myles Garrett? I'll tell you why. I think it is a real possibility. That's on the way. But first, the Sports Bash, brought to you by my friends over at Game Day Men's Health, Egg Harbor Township. So I walked in here the other day, talked to Mike and the team over there, and got a whole tour of the facility. And the one thing that I think separates and stands out, you're an older guy, you're walking in, you feel a little uncomfortable. They make you feel comfortable. TV, got the football on, some, podcast stuff happening, drinks, couple of chips or whatever you're looking for. Put your feet up and just kind of relax. They check you out from all levels, testosterone levels, all of it. Get your blood work done. They've got an unbelievable setting in there that really makes you feel at home, comfortable, zero fluff, no shortcuts. Go in there, get the tough questions answered at this stage of your life, guys. Call Game Day Men's Health and EHT, 609-365-7088. Find out what it's all about. First chance you get in there, consultation, answer all the questions, free day. Walk in just to check out the place. English Creek Avenue, EHT, GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Go to the website, search around, and find out, hey, a lot of people around you might be having some things come up. Don't let it happen to you. Get checked out at Game Day Men's Health, EHT. All right, 331 Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming, X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Is that what the Cleveland Browns could be saying to Myles Garrett? Anything but you. I doubt it. But here is what Jeremy Fowler said earlier today when asked about the possibility of the Eagles trading for Myles Garrett. Take a listen.
So way early, I'm connecting some dots here, admittedly, but this is a conversation that some people in the league have had, that the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the most aggressive, if not the most aggressive teams on the trade market, will be looking for a pass rusher. Josh Sweat, the Super Bowl likely or close MVP, could be out. The expectation is that he will sign elsewhere, so they're going to have a need there. Myles Garrett, they would not want to see him go to the Washington Commanders, for example. If that was to gain traction, Howie Roseman would likely step in, try to make a deal that is too hard for the Cleveland Browns to refuse. Keep it in mind here, the Browns are a hard no. They're still telling teams they have no interest in trading Myles Garrett. If he were to become available, several teams will be in that. Maybe the Eagles will be one.
All right, that's Jeremy Fowler this morning on Get Up. I thought he said a couple of interesting things there of note. Let's go through them. It's Mike Gill, Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN. One, he's essentially saying, look, if the Washington Commanders are the team that is going to make a play for Myles Garrett, Howie Roseman will not let that happen. But what I like is something that I've been saying all offseason long so far, and I know the offseason hasn't been very long, about 2 weeks, but my prediction has been that Howie Roseman will go like all L.A. Dodgers here. The L.A. Dodgers won the World Series. They were the best team in baseball, and they went out this offseason and said, we're not sitting on one World Series. We want two. We want more. And they went out and signed the top free agents on the market. You know, it wasn't just like they were like, you know what? We've got Ohtani last year. We already have Mookie Betts. Let's just stick with those guys and see if they can win another World Series. No. They went out and said, let's go get more. So what did they do? They went out and got the top guys they could find. You know, last year they went out and got Yamamoto. They already had Ohtani. Last year they had Yamamoto, Ohtani. What do they do? Let's go get Blake Snell. Let's go get Sasaki. So they went out and got two of the top starters on the market. They brought back Glasnow, who was hurt all season last year. Hey, why don't we have Tanner Scott close games for us? So they went out and got the best reliever on the market. So this is a team that said, we are not sitting on one World Series. We want more. And I think Howie Roseman's going to say the same thing this offseason. That one was so much fun, we want to do it again. And if we have to do it a little differently, let's rock and roll with the best guys we can find. So what Jeremy Fowler says there is something that doesn't surprise me at all, that the Philadelphia Eagles would say, hey, if you're going to trade that guy, now, that being said, Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, who, by the way, used to work for the Philadelphia Eagles, so him and Howie Roseman, I would say likely on speed dial, know each other pretty well. Browns GM Andrew Berry said today he cannot imagine a situation where not having Myles Garrett is best for the Browns. Yeah, I know. But at 3-14, Myles Garrett can envision a situation where being in Cleveland is probably not best for the Myles Garrett brand. And sometimes, many times in professional sports, the high-profile athlete generally gets his way. The Browns could try to knock him over and give him a contract extension, but you know what? That would be foolish. If you're the Browns, you had 8 tries with Myles Garrett or whatever it is, let the man move on and take the pile of picks that comes with him. You're not winning a Super Bowl in the Myles Garrett era. You know that. We all know that. You might win a Defensive Player of the Year award. Is that what you're out for, or do you want to try to win championships? So if you're Cleveland, it behooves you to say, who's got the best offer? This guy doesn't want to be here anymore. You can put out the messaging all you want, Andrew Berry. I can't imagine a situation where not having Myles Garrett is best for the Browns. Sure, me too. I feel you, brother. I know a situation where that defense isn't going to be as good. But your quarterback situation has been a disaster, and I'm not saying the Philadelphia Eagles can really help you with that, but they can give you some more picks and try to help you achieve that goal at some point. Because Myles Garrett, great, not helping the Browns win a Super Bowl. What he could do is get paired up with Jalen Carter and say, yo, let's win a couple. I'm 29 years old. Let me get 2. Let's go. And make this the three-peat that the Chiefs could not get. That's what your goal is. And I think Howie Roseman has the same mindset that I have right now and have had since the start of this offseason. Let's go, baby. Who's available? Who doesn't want to be where they are? And the one thing with Myles Garrett you have to keep in mind is he told Teddy Bruschi the week of the Super Bowl that he is willing to do whatever it takes to facilitate a trade to a Super Bowl contender. I know a Super Bowl contender, the Philadelphia Eagles. I know a team that would be interested in trading for you because they would probably, the Eagles are probably going to lose the same exact position that Myles Garrett plays. Oh, how about that? I might have to replenish that spot on the field because when Josh Sweat walks out the door, I can replace him with Myles Garrett. It sets up perfectly. It makes a ton of sense. And as Robert and OC asked, how about the cap? Aren't they kind of hand-tied? Yeah, but guess what? Howie Roseman has figured these things out. The cap is a situation in which you can figure out ways to get around, and that comes down to Roseman and Lurie and the situation with, hey, you have to make tough decisions. And that might mean Myles Garrett's here, but Darius Slay is not. I think a lot of people would take that trade-off. Slay, thank you. Super Bowl, always be remembered. Awesome Philadelphia Eagle. But at 34 years old, I think I take the cap savings so I can try to fit a guy like Myles Garrett into my cap situation. They can figure it out. You give them more money up front. You kick it to the back end. All the things, the tricks of the trade that the Philadelphia Eagles have done over the years to get these guys to come here. But, Robert, your fair question. 609-403-0973. This is the move that if it's possible, you have to make. This is the move that it's available to you. You have to make sure it's done. And that reporting there, listen, Jeremy Fowler is not going on national television, in my opinion, saying something to that effect if he doesn't have some sort of insight or intel from the organization. Somebody in that organization says, you know what? I guarantee you this, Howie ain't letting Washington beat him to Myles Garrett. If Myles Garrett's available, the best offer will be coming from Philadelphia. That's my takeaway from those comments on Get Up today, is that somebody let it be known that they will not sit down and say, yeah, Myles Garrett, let's have Washington make the offer. I don't think that would occur. Now, the question is, what does Philadelphia have, right? We've been wondering that. They have their first-round pick 32. They have future first. They're going to have a bunch of compensatory picks so they can probably move, seconds and thirds and fourths if they want to. But in my opinion, you have a Super Bowl window with Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Smith, and this offensive line, plus Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, that crew. You have a 3-year window to try to win as many Super Bowls as possible. 3 years. You have a 3-year window to try to win as many Super Bowls as possible. If you can get 2 in a row, 3 in a row, 3 out of 4, you go for it. And then we look back 20 years from now and say, man, this was the most memorable era of Philadelphia Eagles football. Bar none. Can you imagine a defensive front featuring Myles Garrett and Jalen Carter? What would that do for Nolan Smith, by the way? Can you imagine that setup with Myles Garrett and Jalen Carter on the same defensive front? What are you, flipping a coin to figure out who you're blocking? Double teaming? How are you going to do that? I mean, Myles Garrett is one of the most dominant defensive players in the entire league still. 14 sacks this past season, 6.5 tackles for loss. I mean, you're looking at a guy who would be a complete disruptor. And he would be playing against a guy who's even almost more disruptive in Jalen Carter. Now, Carter's not quite on that level yet, but you pair him up with a guy like this, whew, my gosh. My word. So, Jeremy Fowler, he said two things. One, that Roseman would make an offer that the Browns couldn't say no to, essentially. But the point that he made that I thought was the biggest eye-opener was that he said that Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles will be one of the most aggressive teams in the trade market this offseason. And that, to me, suggests what I said a couple of weeks ago. They will be aggressive to go for two. They want to be special. They want to get that second one. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Text board is open. If I'm an Eagles fan out there listening, am I doing everything I can to make sure I land Myles Garrett? It's like New Jack City. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, I am. I am doing everything I can to go get this type of player. Now, I'm not suggesting it only has to be Myles Garrett, but I'm talking about this level of player, and I don't know where else you're getting that level of player. Somebody else has a guy that's available that you can try to obtain. I'm all ears. But to me, right now, if I have a chance and this team has to take my call and wants to listen, and I don't know that the Browns do. Look, it takes two to tango, and no, the trade offers that people are sending me are not working. You need to give first-round pick. That's where we start. Not these secondary players, Maro Ojomo, Kaylee Ringo. None of those guys are getting this deal done. First-round picks, that's what it is. That's how you get it done. You don't say, hey, again, I hate the guy in my fantasy league that picks up 5 guys off the waiver wire and then he offers them to me for my first-round pick. That's not how trades get done. Nobody wants your third-string corner, your rotational defensive tackle. You've got to say, first-round pick, let's start there, here we go. That's how it gets done. You don't just tiptoe into a guy like Myles Garrett and say, hey, I got 4 possible waiver wire guys. Are you interested in those? No. First-round pick this year. And the one big thing is with Garrett, I think is you have to keep in mind, is he does have a contract this year and next year. So you get him in that window that I'm talking about. You get him in that 2-year window. It's not like he's a free agent at the end of this year. You're getting him for 2 years. So I guess the one thing with that would be, see, he's in a weird spot because he's 30 years old. So do you have to give him two number ones? Or do you say, listen, because he's a little older, we'll give you 1 first-round pick, and then we'll give you a second and a third, something to that effect. Throwing more players into the mix. Now, if they say, listen, we want your first-round pick, your second-round pick, a third-round pick, and then, you got to give us somebody, that's fine. That's fine. 609-403-0973. And the big thing with this is he's a guy in his prime, Garrett. Now, in football, your prime might be a little shorter. Your prime might be a little shorter, 30, 31, but he still has plenty of good football that he can be paired up with some of these other guys and do some damage. So what teams make sense? We know Philadelphia makes sense. And we know Howie Roseman has the audacity to pull the trigger. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Follow, subscribe, be a part of the show. We're here till 6, hanging out with you. Adam Caplan is at the Combine. Football at 4 is on the way. What did Allie Roseman say today? That was an eye-opener. Plus, Nick Sirianni comments on the tush push. Knicks Nuggets at 4:30 and more. Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. 3:52. This hour is brought to you by Broadlee's Plumbing, Heating, Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing, service installation, 609-390-3907. So daylight savings time is March the 9th. It's the day before NFL free agency. Let there be light. The start of the NFL free agent period, March 10th. I think daylight savings, I'm pretty sure, is March the 9th. I'm pretty positive that that's what it is. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. A lot of people watching on the X platform today. Appreciate you guys. Text messages are coming in. Dan in EHC says, does Myles Garrett have the mentality to be an Eagle? I don't know Myles Garrett personally. I think he is a great human being. I think he's been the man of the year candidate for the Cleveland Browns. Yes, I think he has the mentality to be a Philadelphia Eagle. I'll take my chances there, Dan in EHT. Mike in Dover says to get Garrett, it would start at JD and possibly 2 firsts. I don't think it's a good trade, to be honest, unless it's less than that. I would want to part with Nolan. I wouldn't want to part with Nolan or more than 1 first. JD is a 1, and a 1 is the highest I would go. I'm assuming you're meaning JD is Jordan Davis. I don't know anybody referring to Jordan Davis as JD, but Mike, I would do Jordan Davis and a first. I don't know that you need to do 2 first. I think that you can get creative. I'm a fan of adding Myles Garrett in almost any capacity. Now, I'm not going to be ridiculous. I'm not giving him 5 first-round picks. I'm not doing like a Herschel Walker trade here, but I think a first and some mid-round picks and possibly, if you're telling me Jordan Davis is the guy that gets it done, I take that shot because you know why? I can get a 5th, 6th round nose tackle, defensive tackle, run-stuffing guy in the draft. I like a couple of the guys that I got. I could probably look in free agency. So I do that deal. There, Mike in Dover. Coming up, more Sports Bash on the way. Football at 4. We go to the Combine in Indianapolis. What did Howie Roseman say that opened up eyes today? Plus, Nick Sirianni comments on the tush push. And does Adam Caplan think Jeremy Fowler might be onto something? Stick around. Football at 4 is on the way. Football and 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast is at the Combine in Indianapolis as he joins us for another edition of Football at 4. Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni talking today. We'll get Adam's cliff notes on what he heard, plus some thoughts on the Combine. He'll be back on Friday with a lot of notes on the Combine. But what year at the Combine is this for you, Adam Caplan?
Oh, Mike, good to talk to you. I believe this is 24th. Yeah, now, they didn't have a Combine, I think, in 21. But I've been to every one that they had since 2002. And it's funny, I was talking to some old-time reporters that I've got to know, Matt Mayoko, covers the Niners and others, about it. Like when I came here, Mike, the access was incredible. Maybe there would be 75 people from the media standpoint. Well, Mike, there are actually, and this is interesting, it's becoming a bigger deal here than almost the Super Bowl. So there were 60 tables taken for the media in terms of podcasters and a lot of team websites and radio stations. So it's become a bigger deal for the media than it was clearly when I first started covering the league and when I first came here in 2002. And by the way, it used to be held at not at Lucas Oil Stadium to start. It was at the RCA Dome, which is connected to the convention center.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say it's more people covering it, but has it lost its impact some with some of the players? We see quarterbacks don't really want to throw, and some of the higher profile guys, you can still find guys that utilize this to move their stock up, but these top guys seemingly are saying, no thanks, I'll wait till my pro day.
Yeah, like Shedeur Sanders, who will be a first-round quarterback. Don't know where he'll go yet. It's too early, but this has been going on for years. A lot of quarterbacks don't throw here. It just depends on what the agent thinks, and does the player agree to it. But this is actually part of our show that dropped on Monday on all platforms. That Jeff Mosher and I discussed this. We talked about the value of the Combine. That was actually the subject of that show. About what teams get out of it, don't get out of it, why it's important, but not to overrate for what it is. It's a very small part of the evaluation profile, really. The number one criteria for evaluating a player is about 75% game tape and then everything else.
Adam, yeah, you do everything. You get this, the weigh-ins, the speed, the medicals, all that stuff. That kind of starts everything up. Yes. And the medicals are really big for some of these guys.
The
and
biggest
the speed,
one.
The biggest one. But the speed thing, this is where some of these guys get enamored by, oh, my God, he was a 4.3. That moves you up.
Mike, that was the story that I told about. Chad Jackson, the receiver from from University of Florida, who the Patriots drafted a number of years ago. And this is definitely at the other place, at the RCA Dome when they would have it there before it got torn down, and he ran a ridiculous 40. I mean, it was not expected. He didn't have a great career at University of Florida. What happened is the Patriots will tell you, as I remember talking to someone from the Patriots years after, where they completely overvalued the time. As you said, the tape tells you everything you need to know about how competitive the football player is, how talented he is, and then all of a sudden, because he runs this 40 time way better than you expected, it doesn't change what kind of football player is. You can't do that. You got to be careful. And I also mentioned when I was at the Senior Bowl many years ago. You might remember Matt Jones, the former Arkansas quarterback.
Oh yeah,
went to the Senior Bowl as a receiver. Now I'll admit I was blown away. No one could live over the 3 days of practice at the Senior Bowl. It didn't matter who was covering him. He ran right by everyone, and we were all blown away. We're like, wow, this kid, who most people thought would be, because they knew he was an athlete, a third or fourth round pick. Well, the Jaguars obviously made a mistake. They overdrafted him in the first round. Now, Matt Jones, unfortunately, had significant off-the-field problems. But you could see the speed, but you can't move him up 3 rounds just because the guy ran fast. You got to be careful about that.
Yeah, well, you know what's interesting? You're out there, so you probably hear some buzz and stuff about some of these things. But you got a guy as high profile as Shedeur Sanders, who obviously has a Hall of Fame father. You know, is he getting a lot of the buzz? Because he seems like a very polarizing draft prospect.
Here's the deal. Cam Ward is clearly a better prospect. It's as I was joking with a friend of mine, it's like going from dial-up internet to high speed. It's not that Shedeur is not a good quarterback. He'll go in the first round. But Cam Ward, the tape is significantly better than Shedeur Sanders. That's the bottom line. So, in my mock draft that I did, the audio-video mock draft, I'll give you a hint. I put Shador in the first 10 picks. Why? And I forget which general manager said this today on the platform here at the Combine. If you don't have, it was Adam Peters, I think, the GM of the Commandos.
Yep.
He said, when you don't have one, you're looking for one, and you never want to be in that spot. And the Commanders are not in it anymore. They don't need it. They've got their guy. But it's a terrible feeling. When the bottom dropped out for the Eagles on the Carson Wentz situation, they didn't know Jalen Hurts was going to be the franchise quarterback. He was drafted to be Wentz's backup. That's the truth. They didn't know that. But thankfully for the Eagles' sake, that Hurts worked out after the Wentz stuff didn't. But how many teams, we'd have to go through, we don't have time to go through this. How many teams went through their quarterback situation where they failed on the first guy, although it started out great, and then the backup turned out to be the franchise quarterback? Like, how does that happen? It doesn't happen.
That's a great question. I don't know.
I have no idea. I can't imagine a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had situations where the starter got old and moved on, like Brett Favre moved on and Rodgers took over, but not where the starter flamed out and then got traded to make way for the backup. I mean, even, Rodgers left and Love took over. Now he hasn't won the Super Bowl, but yeah, that's a good point by you. Adam Caplan's at the Combine. At the Combine today, Sirianni and Roseman. Let's start a little bit with Sirianni. He said that they had an extensive interview process before they promoted Kevin Petullo. Do we have any idea of any? Because we didn't hear any other names, so it was just basically he got promoted. We didn't hear that they interviewed anybody.
Mike, it's so funny because, they did. They had to interview 2 minority candidates, but I forget what show I did, and someone said, "Hey, so who else do you think they're going to interview?" I said to the host of the show, because he knew we put out a while back, probably it was before the playoffs started, there was going to be Petullo most likely. That would be the replacement if Kellen Moore became a head coach, and he did with the Saints. And I said to the guy, I got to be honest with you, I have no idea who the other names are. We're not going to make them up. Josh McCown, we know there was a guy who they liked, who, by the way, Kevin O'Connell spoke very highly of today with their quarterbacks coach. But and Nick talked about it. So, I was 5 feet from him when he said it. And he made it pretty clear continuity had a lot to do with it. No question. He did confirm that we knew already Parks Frazier will be their pass game coordinator. He didn't want to really talk about it because they haven't announced anything yet. The reason is, Mike, he didn't say it, but I'll say it for him. They have to hire a quarterbacks coach and an assistant O-line coach. And the Eagles historically, Mike, they won't announce their coaching staff unless it's full, with rare exception. They just don't like to do it. And by the way, sometimes if a guy's in sign a contract, he could back out, which has happened to some teams over the years. You got to be careful, but we're so late in the game. It's not like there should be guys leaving for other jobs. So, but the big part I do want to mention before we move on, because I know you want to talk about what Howie Roseman talked about and some other stuff if we have time here. But the tush-push thing, man, is fascinating because I know other teams. I haven't talked to you about this. I just happened to run into some guys last night when I got here. It just became, because it got out about we know now it's the Packers are one of the teams, and Mark Murphy, their president, went on record. Their GM today, Brian Gutekunst, went on record. And Sirianni was defending it today, man. I could see it in his eyes, man. He was, because Nick tries to play stuff close to the vest. He was not doing that today. He came out firing today. He was not happy about the criticism.
Yeah, I did hear a little bit of his presser today. I mean, he went on about how much they practice and the intricacies of what goes into that play, and he gave a passionate plea as to why they do it well and other teams maybe don't, but how much time they put into that play. But Adam, I mean, listening all day, national talk, everyone is talking about this tush push and whether it should stay or go.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't see it. I saw the clip of it. I guess the Insider Show on NFL Network, they were talking about it.
Oh, it's been everywhere. I mean, all day today, every national show is debating whether or not. Oh, it is everywhere. Yes,
that's awesome. I know it's a slow. Although free agency starts in less than 2 weeks, it starts in 2 weeks from yesterday. That's how crazy. March 10th is when all the big deals will go off the board. So it's coming right up here, Mike. But this is a big deal. And by the way, I'll be at the owners' meetings in March, Mike. I'm sure I'll do your Tuesday show that week when before I fly back on Wednesday, and that'll be brought up. I got wind of this, and I'll just put a little. This is not news, but something that I'm told that's going to happen is the competition committee and the special teams coaches will be talking about not only how well the revised kickoff rule was, but where the kickoff, where not only how well it did, but what will happen if the ball goes in the end zone. It's going to be at the 35, 30-yard line. I could tell you that's going to be. There's a realistic chance that if there's a touchback, that the yardage where the ball is placed is going to change. Talking to multiple special teams coaches last night. Believe it or not, I usually don't talk to them, but they're staying near my hotel, and I saw them on the street, and then a couple guys stopped me, and we were just talking, and that came up. Because I asked them, I said, "What did you think of the new kickoff since I'm here?" And one guy said, "Hey, just so you know, I think a touchback's real chance they start at 35." I'm like, "All right, that's interesting. I'll mention it somewhere."
Well, the whole point too. The whole point, Adam, wasn't it to try to be like strategic, and then it was almost like team said, "You want the ball at the 30? Who cares? Take it."
Right, and I know Mike Tomlin. By the way, I'll give you another nugget. Mike Tomlin, who's a part of the competition committee, obviously the Steelers head coach. Apparently, he's been very vocal on some stuff. So we'll see what happens. But the competition committee is phenomenal. They do a great job, and we were able to talk to some of those guys. This year, by the way, it's going to be in West Palm at the Breakers. For those of you who like this stuff, that'll be the big thing before the draft. Is the competition committee and Mike and what rules get changed or not changed. You know, the Eagles usually every year they're pretty vocal behind the scenes on certain things.
All right, Adam Caplan's with us here. Howie Roseman did speak as well. Now I want to get he declined to answer about Myles Garrett. However, and you have said before, well, the Browns don't want to trade Garrett. As Andrew Berry said today, I can't envision a team without him. Although Jeremy Fowler said if they do have to trade him, that Roseman would do whatever it takes to make sure the Commandos do not get him, that he would put together a package that the Browns would not be able to say no to. He also said, forget Garrett, okay? Yeah. Let's say you say, Mike, Garrett is not getting traded. Get it out of your mind. Fine. The one thing I thought Fowler said that was interesting
I'm not saying that. I was at the – just so you know, I know Andrew a little casually, but I'm just going to tell you, his language today was very strong, but this is in my – we're going to talk about this on Inside the Birds tomorrow, Mike. He never said they're not trading him.
He never said he didn't trade him. And the thing that Fowler said that I thought was interesting about – forget Garrett – he said that they want to be very aggressive, the most aggressive team in the trade market this offseason. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Who, Cleveland?
Philadelphia.
I didn't hear it. In what context? Is he saying how he said that, or that's what he'd heard? I didn't listen to it.
Yeah, well, let me see if I can pull it up for you real quick here, and we can try to listen to it at the same time. So basically he said, what I'm hearing is they want to be the most aggressive, if not the most aggressive team in free agency. All right, here, I will play this for you, Adam. Here, let's play this now. This is Jeremy Fowler this morning on Get Up.
Why I should be thinking about Myles Garrett on the Eagles.
So way early, I'm connecting some dots here, admittedly, but this is the conversation that some people in the league have had, that the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the most aggressive, if not the most aggressive teams on the trade market, will be looking for a pass rusher. Josh Sweat, the Super Bowl likely or close MVP, could be out. The expectation is that he will sign elsewhere. So they're going to have a need there. Myles Garrett, they would not want to see him go to the Washington Commanders, for example. If that was to gain traction, Howie Roseman would likely step in, try to make a deal that is too hard for the Cleveland Browns to refuse. Keep it in mind here, the Browns are a hard no. They're still telling teams they have no interest in trading Myles Garrett. If he were to become available, several teams will be in that. Maybe the Eagles will be one.
All right, so there you go. There's the context.
Yeah, just so you know, and I know Jeremy, we used to work together. This is not a question of anything he said, but just understand something. It won't take the Washington Commanders to draw Howie Roseman's interest in Myles Garrett. If Myles Garrett is available, first of all, Andrew Berry and Howie are very close. Okay, Howie's been a mentor to Andrew. I could give you some background on this. I know a lot about this. So, if Myles Garrett became available, if Howie's not first in line, he's literally calling him 50 times. Howie, when he wants something, because I've talked to other GMs, is relentless.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, he doesn't need the Commanders to up it. That won't matter. It just adds a little fuel to the fire. But Jeremy's right. Josh Sweat, there's a real feeling he won't be back. It's not that the Eagles don't want him back. And we're going to get into this closer to free agency, but I'll give you a nugget here. Mike, the thing that the Eagles are dealing with, which is a struggle for them. And obviously it would be a real struggle if they added Myles Garrett, because Howie talked about that today. He didn't talk about Garrett. But when you make major – I'm looking at what Howie said in my notes here. When you make major acquisitions, it impacts other areas of cash and cap. You can't – it's just – for instance, if the Eagles – let's leave Garrett to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they re-sign Milton Williams, which is going to take, as we told our Patreon people 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, 21 to 22 million a year. Could get higher depending on how many teams are in it, how much leverage he has. He also changed agents last year. You're going to have to every single NFL team, all 32 of them, look at 3-year increments. That's how they build their cash and cap budgets. So Nolan Smith, if he has another good year, I know he's coming off of the tricep surgery, but if he has another good year, that deal could average 27 to 30 million. Okay, then you look at Jalen Carter. It starts at 30 million a season. That's where the tackle market is going for the top guys. That's where that could go. So, Mike, you're talking about $110 million to 4 players per on an average per season for 4 players. It's really hard to pull off. That's why Josh Sweat, I'm just bringing that up. That's why there's a realistic chance he leaves. It's just not that the Eagles don't want him back. They want Zach Bond back. They'd love to have Milton Williams back, but over a 3-year period, you cannot pay everybody. I know that there's just so you understand, I know they've signed a lot of guys offensively, but it's really hard to pull it off at every position.
Absolutely. And, somebody had texted in earlier and wondered if you trade for Garrett, how does that affect the cap situation? Because he has this year and another year on his deal. So he signed through 2026 at a pretty big number. So those are things that, listen.
That'll get rid of keeping Garrett. But I know my friend Rick Spill, my old friend Rick, would say, we have no intention in trading said player. It was Adrian Peterson, by the way. And he's talking about I just thought that all Barry had to do was say we're not trading the player. That's it. It's done. When you say that, Mike, we're not talking about it anymore. You could shut it down.
Yeah, you
could shut other teams down. So I just thought it was interesting that he chose not to say that.
Roseman also said, we have a lot of guys in the prime of their careers, long-term contracts, 26, 27, 28-year-old. We got to make sure we keep this window as long as possible. And that's why I find it interesting, do you take that shot and say, look, our best players are all in those mid to late 20s. Let's go get, I liken it to, I said, Adam, at the beginning of the show, the Dodgers won a World Series. Then they went out and got the best pitcher they could get. They added the Blake Snell. They got the Japanese pitcher, and they said, let's just keep adding more to try to get 2. Is Rose been looking at, I got this window of young players. Let's add to it and get another one.
Well, yeah. See, here's the part of it. The Eagles are picking currently at 32nd in the first round. That's not a great. It's a great place to be because you won the Super Bowl. You're not getting the type A player. So what would they? Again, we'll talk more about this as we get closer to March 10th. But if you really look at it, what would they be trading for? Potentially a starting corner if they want to keep Cooper DeJean as their dynamic nickel player, which he does. He plays multiple nickel roles, but he's a nickel player. What else would they be doing? They would need edge rushers. They would be right in the market for an edge rusher. There's no question about it. Making a trade, it's hard to get them. But the other thing is, and this is, I think I know I've told you this before I get out of here. The Raiders told me several times in 2018 they weren't trading Khalil Mack. And then John Gruden got nervous because he thought he was wrong. Mack never said he wasn't going to show up before the season started. But he got cold feet and he traded him. And he also thought he traded Khalil Mack to a team that had no chance of the playoffs. Well, guess what? The Bears shocked the world with Mitch Trubisky and they made the playoffs. So those picks were not as valuable as they thought they would be.
Well, Adam, enjoy the rest of this week down there, and of course you'll have some nuggets on Friday's show as well from the Combine as the Eagles, the draft process. You mentioned 32. This is a spot they have traded out of before. They got Nolan Smith way down in the 30 spot. So, there's areas, defensive tackle you can get at that spot in the draft. Edge rushers, good draft for that as well. I'm sure we'll talk more about that as the draft process goes on. But you just said it, March 10th is the start of free agency. We'll be all over that here on Football at 4. Thank you, Adam Caplan.
Thank you.
And you can check out the Inside the Birds podcast for more from the guys over at Inside the Birds. on the Sports Bash Live. We do it every day. It's called Football at 4. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll do the football every day, all season, right here on the Sports Bash. There's no off-season. Football at 4 brought to you by Bet365, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Yo, stop by Nizam's Indian Restaurant, Route 40, Egg Harbor Township. They're the number 2 ranked restaurant in the state of New Jersey by NJ.com. Visit thenizams.com to check out their great menu and check out everything they have to offer for you. Maybe a corporate outing, maybe bring the office out there for lunch. They have the lunch buffet on the weekends. They're open every day from 11:30 to 9:30, 7 days a week. They can host your private party, corporate event, whatever you're looking for. The Nizams, Route 40, Egg Harbor Township. They got basically every Indian fan favorite dish that you are looking for. So if you've never done it before, that's the number one question. Never eaten it before. What do you think? I say, I like it. You got to go and try everything. Bring a big group of people. That's my recommendation, okay? If you're on the fence, you don't know what to expect, bring a big group of people, 8, 10, and just kind of order a bunch. They'll bring it all out for you, and everybody can try something. It's all authentic. They got the best cooks out there. They'll all take care of you, and you can check it all out at the Nizam's Indian Restaurant, Route 40, EHT, right in front of Boscov's. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. That was Football at 4 with Adam Caplan. Coming up, Nick Earnshaw has today's edition of Nick's Nuggets on the Sports Bash Live. We'll see what's on Nick's mind today. I'm sure. Did he watch the Sixers last night? Yesterday he said he bailed on the Sixers. Was he back last night? More Sports Bash coming up. 429 Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube at Mike Gill Show. What's up, everybody? Hopefully you're enjoying your Tuesday. Beautiful day out there, man. It is a great day outside. Make you feel like we might be through. Not normally, though. Sometimes you get a little cold day in March, but Phillies spring training's happening. But we had a ice-cold night at the center last night. The Sixers were down by 50 at one point during that game. Now, luckily, Nick's Nugget says he has given up on the team, so you likely didn't have to watch the slop that the rest of us were subjected to last night for the Nuggets.
Yeah, I can't help myself but tune in, right? Like, I had to tune in at least for a couple of minutes, right? I go in, I get home, I went food shopping last night, I get home, it's like second quarter, I think it was, or around there. I turn on the television, and they're down 19 points. I said, oh, that's it for me. I'm out. I totally checked out. I tweeted it out. I said, I'm done. I tweeted a lineup from the process that I'd rather watch than that 76ers team last night. I'm just done.
Well, I said it at the beginning of the show. They lost a game to the San Antonio Spurs during the process. It was like 114-69 or something like that. They lost by like over 50 in that game. And that was the game that was okay, this is embarrassing. Like, they brought Jerry Colangelo in.
Yeah.
Like, Hinkie then wrote his manifesto and he left. Like, that game there, when you lost by like 50 to the Spurs that night, and I looked at that lineup today. It was like Nerlens Noel, Robert Covington, T.J. McConnell, Isaiah Cannon, Hollis Thompson was like, that team lost by over 50, and it was like, okay, we got to do something here. This team last night is down 50 with 2 max players on the floor.
Yeah, that's 10 times worse than having a team that's actually tanking, that was going through a rebuild, losing by 50. That's a little different than when you have 2 max players out there, a team that's supposed to be in the postseason, in the hunt, for a team that's like a couple of games ahead of them at this point in the standings, who you're trying to fight even to try and get in the play-in spot. As a player, you're still going out there, and you're supposed to be giving a little bit of effort, but you're down that much. They were down 19, so I didn't even see it get to 50. I didn't
see it get to 50 either, by the way. Started a new show last night that one of the listeners referred. It was called 0 Day, I think.
Okay.
Is it 0 Day? It's got Robert De Niro. He's the former president. So we watched the first episode of that last night. I did not even see it get to 50. I said, you know what? I'm out. I said earlier in the show today, Earnshaw, I liken this to, I really believe this, by the way. This is what these pro sport owners need to do. When your team comes out with that effort, just like if you go to a restaurant and you have a bad experience, the owner says, my fault, the meal's on me. You need to be refunded for your tickets for last night. That's a friggin' disgrace. And if I'm the owner of that team and I took your money, I would feel awful. And I would have to say, that is not what we are all about. Here is your money back for that game last night. I apologize. Please come back and see us again. That is unacceptable. And that is the way professional sports teams should be run. Because if you were putting out the kind of money you put out, your team is down by 50, you should be embarrassed as the owner of that franchise to allow that to happen like an owner of a restaurant would do. You comp them the meal, you comp those people their tickets. That's not a good time for your computer
listen,
to go
the
frozen
tickets,
over there.
I wouldn't even want the refund on the tickets. I want the refund on the actual meals. Listen, here's what I would want, Mike Gill, okay? After last night, this is what I would want to happen. If I were the 76ers, I wouldn't want those tickets refunded, because you know how much those tickets were last night, Mike? They were $2 a ticket with $4 fees.
Doesn't matter.
You don't
forget that. Forget the $2 fee. The people who have season tickets who are spending money on tickets. I'm talking about the people who spend real money, season ticket holders who go out there and spend real money on their tickets. You have to do something for those people. I hear people who say, how much money they spend on the tickets. You have to do something to say that's unacceptable. You cannot say, hey, keep coming out here paying big money. Now, I get it. Some people got in for $2. I'm not talking about those people, but you should take care of those people as well. I'm talking about the people who spent real money. I'm not talking about Nicky Nosebleeds spending $2. Yeah, you want your food refunded? Fine. No, I can't go that far. You go and say to the people who spent money on that slop last night, I apologize. That is not what we are about. We want you to come back and have a good time. Please, here's your money back. It's that simple. It is that simple. You know, these people that spent money, can you imagine being a season ticket holder? You can't get rid of the tickets. Nobody's buying them from you. All right, let's bring Earnshaw. You had a horrible connection, had a horrible time. I went on a passionate rant, and then you're sitting there frozen at me, and then your point that you brought up was BS. It was awful.
It was an awful. I thought it was a great point. I thought it was a fan. I know what you're saying about the fans and the season tickets. I get that. Last night, I'm just saying it wasn't that much to refund. It was about $6 a ticket. I would rather be refunded. They should comp everybody at least free like nuggets or something last night.
I'm not talking about the people who paid $2. I'm talking about the season ticket holders.
I agree.
Who spend thousands of dollars on those seats. You have 3-4 tickets. I've heard people say, I could spend, somebody told me what they spent on the season tickets for the Sixers, that they could go to every Eagles game, 16 Eagles games for what they spend on Sixers tickets. Can you imagine you spent that kind of money to go to that game last night and you're down 50?
No, I would absolutely. That's why I'm not going anymore. I'm not buying nosebleed tickets. No, I'm moving over to the Flyers now. I'm going to sit up in the nosebleeds over there. And this brings me to my first nugget, Mike. It's because
By the way,
I'm not
before
showing
you go,
any effort.
Before you go, got this text message. Mike,
yeah, go ahead.
My husband and I paid $780 for 2 tickets and parking last night, and we left at the end of the third. Those people should be refunded. If you are Josh Harris or anybody from that organization, you say, I cannot accept that. It's just if Josh Harris went out for a meal and the restaurant messed up his meal, they would say to Josh Harris, the meal's on me. That is not reflective of our restaurant. I apologize. Let me take care of your meal, sir. We hope you come back. That's how Josh Harris needs to act to his patrons. That meal last night was awful. Here you go. There's your refund.
You know what he should do? He should do what he did in the postseason last year and buy out a few sections and just have people from the community go who can't go to games, just send and buy out sections. Because, I mean, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't even pay to go to these games the way the effort's been. And that brings me to my nugget. And it's the Sixers haven't shown any effort. According to NBC Sports Philly, since January 1st, listen, they've gone 7-20. They are dead last in defensive rating. That shows lack of effort, Mike. That's lack of effort. When your defensive rating is dead last, they can't play a lick of defense. I mean, you're playing against the Chicago Bulls, who have given up on their season, and they had nobody on their roster, a bunch of nobodies, and you're down 50 to that team. I would never pay to go to that game. I feel so bad for season ticket holders, people like who texted in, who paid all that money to go watch that. That's a lack of effort. The fact you're not even giving any effort out there, I mean, that's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. You have 2 max players out there. And I got to read this quote from Paul George. I thought this was a disturbing quote after the game last night. This is what Paul George said. He said, we've shown no sign of a team that will compete. We just don't have the habits of a champion or a playoff contending team would have. To be honest, right now, it's a little far-fetched. All we can do is work hard and try to just keep going. That's from one of your max players. Really? Really, Paul George? What effort have you shown all season? Tobias Harris is in the postseason right now, the guy you replaced, and you got max money, a lot of money. You were supposed to come here. They sent Dr. J to your house. And you, what effort have you given this entire season? It's embarrassing.
Hey, I'm actually happy that he told the truth as opposed to some of the other nonsense we talked
what
last
has he
night.
Done? What has he done?
Nothing.
Well, he hasn't done anything either. So he has to. Why can't he be the leader? He is a veteran in this league who's been around a long time. Be a leader in that locker room.
I thought he was a leader last night. He was the one guy that stood up like a mature guy. I got Maxey rocking in a rocking chair with a hoodie on saying, well, yeah, that's not the kind of effort that I'm thinking of. Well, you're a max player, Maxey, and you're on that court, and that team is down 50 with you on the floor last night. I don't know how you get the professional pride to be a player who's been an all-star, signed a contract for max money, And George is a part of that, but Maxey as well. And you're rocking in the rocking chair after the game with your hoodie on. Step up to the microphone, take your damn hood off, and tell everybody this is unacceptable.
Yeah,
That's why I have a big problem. These people who want to build around Maxey and say, hey, build a team around him. That is not a mature way to handle that situation last night. And people say, why don't you build around him? He's a max player on the floor versus the worst Bulls team in modern history last night, and they're losing by 50 at home.
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with you on the build around Maxey crowd. That's ridiculous. He's not a one, first of all. He's not a one. Maybe one day. I don't see it. I think he's a very good piece. He's an all-star level player. You have to give those type of players max money in today's day and age. Fine. But he is not someone I would want to build a team around. He's great. He's happy-go-lucky. This year he hasn't been. Last night was a disgrace by him in the post-game presser as well. The Sixers are an absolute atrocity. It's so funny. You go from the Philadelphia Eagles, who are just they are a beacon of positivity. They showed a lot of character, a lot of pride, and they put effort out there every single week, right? Remember what happened at the beginning of the season? They stepped up, they matured, etc. And then they win a Super Bowl, and then you go from the Super Bowl, the highs of highs, to the 76ers as a sports fan in Philadelphia. I mean, you couldn't get more polar opposite than those two organizations right now.
No, you couldn't. And you would think that if you're the Sixers, you just watch how the fans swarmed those streets and showed all the passion and love for what they did. And you might be moved by that to say, you know what? Look at this, man. Let's do something here. We have the talent to do it because you know what? They do have players that many people all across NBA circles felt, hey, they brought in Paul George. They've got Tyrese Maxey. Now the Embiid thing has been a total disaster. You can't even quantify what happened with that whole situation. But still, I have a hard time watching with Maxey and George, two max players, and you're losing by 50.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that Paul George and Maxey can be on the court together. Then being out fine, I know it would be a little bit more of a struggle, but Paul George has been around this league for a long time. He's been a good player in this league. The fact that he can't get it going, he can't be a leader on this team. Maxey as well, he's supposed to be a leader, taking that next step. They gave you a big contract. You need to step up. But then it leads me to this point, Mike.
Well, I will say,
what do you do? What do you do with Nick Nurse?
I know the team is not built for Maxey per se.
It's not.
It's not. It's built for Embiid. But last year, when Embiid went out, they were the 2 seed. They dropped almost out of the playoffs. Maxey was, I think they were 16-24 without Embiid last year. If you're a max player, keep me 500. Keep me afloat, for God's sakes. Listen, he's 24 years old. I'm not saying get rid of him. I'm not saying that at all. No. I'm a big Maxey fan. But I feel like too many times people think he's just like the savior and that they need to just build around him. I think you will. I've said this before. This team had an undersized scoring guard at one time, and they could never build around him. It was a very hard thing to find pieces to play around a 6'2" scoring guard.
Yeah, listen, Maxey, he's not a one. I don't know why people can't understand that. He is not your first option. You want him as a co-star, not the star, not the guy. He is a great co-star. Him next to Embiid, great. I would love that. Unfortunately, Joel Embiid can't stay on the court, and that situation has just completely deteriorated. The reports coming out from the Inquirer, they got to take pieces of his hip to put in his leg for the. I mean, just it's gone off the rails at this point, and it's gotten to a point where you've seen the guys like Greg Oden and the Yao Mings of the world. That it's getting towards that situation at this point, unfortunately. But if you look at this team going into next season, I mean, can you bring Nick Nurse back? I just don't think Nick Nurse can say anything to get these guys motivated at this point. Do you have to make a coaching change? Something? I don't know what you do at this point. How do you bring Nick Nurse back? Daryl Morey saying if you squint or whatever he said, whatever the quote was, that was a moronic comment by him. Just you squint. I don't see a winning team right now. I don't think anybody does.
No, I mean, obviously you don't. Nurse is an interesting guy. I'm not a blame the coach kind of guy, but what I do put on the coach though is the culture and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like he's got bad body language, bad messaging. I don't know what he says inside there. I don't know if he's connecting with people or not. it's not connecting with the people on the outside. And I like Nick Nurse as the coach. I thought he was going to do a good job as a guy who, won a championship, set the culture, seemed like a likable guy. He seems miserable. He seems like he would rather be anywhere but in this situation. He seems like a guy who's like, this is not what I signed up for. So quite frankly, I don't even know that he wants to be here anymore. So I don't know what you do with him, because now you're on to your third coach in like 4 seasons. You're paying him a ton of money. You paid, Rivers, a ton of money. The Morey situation, that one's the one to keep an eye on, because quite frankly, somebody has to look at what happened last night and say, how did we get here? How did we get here? You can't let it keep going like this. It'll be interesting. I know Bob Myers is in the Washington Commanders organization. He's the guy who built those Warriors teams. Can Josh Harris somehow talk to him and say, hey, can you run my basketball team? I don't know what you do with the two situations there, because, listen, quite frankly, people, I got text messages here talking about, Jim from Williamstown says, you take Maxey and Nurse and start all over again. The owner's horrible. The GM's horrible. Listen, the owner has tried. I can't sit here and rip the owner. I mean, I get it. People don't like the owner. I don't care that he owes the Commanders. Who cares? He's done everything. They have tried everything. It's not like they said, hey, Mr. Harris, can we spend money? And he said no. They have spent money over and over and over again. Mr. Harris, can we make trades? Go for it. They trade it for every big name they could possibly try to get. Mr. Harris, can we fire the coach and get a championship coach? Fine. Mr. Harris, can we fire the guy who won a championship and hire another coach who won a championship? Fine. Mr. Harris, can we hire a GM that's one of the most well-regarded GMs in all of basketball? Can we do that? Go for it. When has he said no? And when has there been a move that they have made that someone said, what kind of idiot is running this team? No. Every time they have made a trade or a move, anybody who covers the NBA has said, man, the Sixers really made a good deal here. They got a great deal on this one. They got a good deal here. That was a smart idea. This was a good signing. That's a great coaching hire. I can't sit here and blame the owner. If your only reason you're blaming the owner is because you don't like the fact that he owns the football team that happens to be the rival of the Eagles, you're misguided.
I can't listen. I don't love that Josh Harris owns the Commanders, but you're right. I mean, what else is he supposed to do? He's hired everyone. He's hired the big names. He's hired the big coaches. He's let those GMs go out and make trades to get big names. How many stars have come through this organization in the past 8 or 9 years? Jimmy Butler, James Harden, Paul George. I mean, the list goes on and on. They've tried. Ben Simmons was a failure. That took a complete 180, 360 turn. I mean, everything that could go wrong and just be an absolute disaster, every single situation, it's just turned out not to work out. I mean, it's just bad luck at this point. I don't know how else to explain it. Ben Simmons falls off the face of the earth and, forgets to shoot a layup, and then all of a sudden forgets how to play basketball. Markelle Fultz forgets how to shoot a basketball. Your number 1 overall pick. Jimmy Butler, you don't re-sign him. You bring in Al Horford, the only guy that could stop Embiid defensively in the Eastern Conference. That doesn't work out. He was horrible. Then goes back to Boston and wins a championship. I mean, I don't know what else they were supposed to do. They've done everything possible to try to make this team competitive. They were up 3-2 against Boston a couple of years ago in the second round with James Harden, fell apart in Game 6, and then got blown out in Game 7. They had an 8 seed waiting for them in the Eastern Conference Finals. Everything that has gone wrong, they have had plenty of opportunities to get past the second round, to be a contender every year. I can't sit here and blame Josh Harris for the hires he's made. I mean, you can't. I mean, they've had every big name coach, Nick Nurse, Doc Rivers. They went from a doc to a nurse. They've had Daryl Morey. Elton Brand led the charge. They had Sam Hickey for a while to set them up, drafted Embiid, drafted Ben Simmons. I don't know what else you're supposed to do at this point. They are a cursed franchise.
Well, listen, the whole second round thing, too, it's frustrating. But to get to the second round year after year after year after year, you've done something right. You are one of the more competitive franchise. Now, people don't care about competitive. In the sports world we live in, it's if you're not first, you're last. They're not last. They have been very successful for about a 6-year stretch here. They haven't got to where we wanted them to get to. So I can't sit here and say the owner has failed and he's a bad owner. They have put so many resources into this team. They just haven't been able to win that big game for whatever reason. They've gotten to a 7th game against Atlanta, and the guy who's the number 1 pick in the draft, a guy who was a 3-time All-Star, an All-NBA player, all of a sudden has a brain cramp and then has gone AWOL ever since. They get to the 7th game against the Raptors and a double doink, and that team ends up winning an NBA championship. So they were good enough. They've had teams that were good enough. So again, I go back to the blame on the owner. I can't sit here and say that he has been the reason.
No, I'm not going to do it either. Listen, I don't love that he owns the Commanders. You and I, Pete G, have talked about it many times. But I mean, the guy's hired everyone that all the fans and everybody wanted him to hire. He's done that. They've gone out and got pieces to put around Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons. It just has not worked out. Mike, one big nugget for you today.
There you go. That's the nugget that a lot of people seemingly are talking about. And, of course, that game last night has a lot of people very angry and upset for good reason, by the way. I have no problem if you watch that and paid money and said never again or it's time to do something. But ultimately, a ugly loss for the Sixers.
Yep, bad loss. I watched documentaries all last night. That was my night last night. I fed myself information, Mike Gill.
Good stuff. All right, Nuggets, see ya.
See ya.
All right, Nick, Nuggets is back again tomorrow here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, follow along, be a part of the show. 609-403-0973. Send us a text. Also, download the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City and message us through the app on your phone. It's easy to do. Hit the message us button and type your message. It'll come right to the studio. We'll read it off here on the Sports Bash. When we come back, Sigh with Ryan Rothstein. We'll get into what happened last night, what could be next, the Eagles offseason, the Phillies spring training, all that and more. It's next on the Sports Bash. Your home of the Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles.
I don't know that there's a general manager or president of basketball out there that's going to take on that contract. I mean, we're talking about a guy who only played in 19 games this season, and we're talking about you got 4 years left after it. It's not one of those contracts where you have a lot of, incentives to make, and he has a guaranteed deal. So I feel like the 76ers are stuck right now. I don't see a team willing to take that contract, at least not right now.
All right, that's Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer. He said that on Joe and Q. Nobody will be willing to take that contract. So the Joel Embiid, I'm getting text messages, you got to get rid of Embiid, blah, blah, blah. You got to get more creative. All right, let's stop being mouth breather and say, get rid of Embiid. That's not going to happen. All right, you got to come up with a better idea than that. You guys are smart. You know they're not taking Embiid. If the first thing you think of as a fan who probably doesn't watch any of the games to begin with is you got to get rid of Embiid, you really think anybody's going to take a $248 million guaranteed contract over the next 4 years after watching what he just put on for 19 games this year? I'm going to give everybody a second pitch because the first pitch was ball 4. Wild pitch, out of the zone. Come up with better ideas, people, because they can't and will not be trading Joel Embiid. If they do, holy moly, Morey would get. And now listen, I'm an Embiid fan. I love Embiid. I don't want to see them trade him. But I also can acknowledge no one's taking that deal for $248 million. And that's where we start our 5 o'clock hour, Rye or Sigh. Ryan Rothstein is back, man. And, that was rock bottom last night. I said there was a game in 2016. They lost by 50 to the Spurs. And that kind of was a night where they had to make some changes. Like Jerry Colangelo came in. Hinkie ended up resigning. And it was really one of those 50-point losses in the NBA. Now, they were down by 50. They went on a run to cut it to 32. But it was bad last night, and I can understand people's frustrations. But I don't think it starts with you got to move on from Embiid. That's just very not feasible.
Yeah, last night was an embarrassment. I'll just get right into it, man. Rye or Sigh here. It's, again, a big sigh. You and I are talking yesterday at this time about rock bottom, about things cannot get any worse. Dissecting everything up until yesterday of what we knew and what the Embiid situation has done, yada, yada, yada. And they said, hold my beer. They said, hold my beer. We're going to go ahead into this game tonight where you can buy tickets for $1 and you can watch us essentially lose to a below average team, to put it nicely, by 50 freaking points. It was an embarrassment. The city deserves better. The fans deserve better, man. And it's just, I don't know where we go from here, because here we are today on a Tuesday and we have discovered, Mike Gill, a new rock bottom, right? So I do want to get into the Joel Embiid stuff because, the trade aspect, but I just start quickly with this. How do you, Mike Gill, look at last night's embarrassment? Because you don't lose by 50 to a Chicago Bulls team at home unless you are trying to not try.
I look at it as something that if I'm the owner of the team, and I said this throughout the day, but I'll if I'm the owner of the team, I have to at least, if I'm not going to say, hey, Nick Nurse, you're fired, sorry, this can't go any further, I can't do that to Daryl Morey. I'm not even sure that those people deserve to lose their jobs. I said before, it's like going to a restaurant and having a bad meal, and the restaurant owner comes over to the table and he apologizes and he comps your meal. You should comp the fans their ticket prices last night. You can't be down by 50 in the fourth quarter and as the owner feel good about putting people's money in your pocket. That's where you need to get some goodwill and say, listen, that is unacceptable. That meal's on me tonight. At least get a little goodwill if you're the owner to say, no, I am not accepting that. And if I have to keep refunding people because of your effort, then heads are going to start rolling. That's the only way you could possibly, because these guys are professionals. They want to make the playoffs. But now here's the problem in the fan society. The problem we have in the fan society that we live in is if you're not good enough to win the championship, we don't even want you to make the playoffs. We'd rather have you be horrible. So you're in a no-win situation as a professional athlete who wants to compete and try hard, but the fans don't even want them to compete and try hard at this point.
Yeah, but at least, you're right. But that would be a better situation. At least if the 76ers were saying, you know what, we're not trying for the playoffs. We recognize all of the shortcomings and failures this year. It's best for us to shut everything down. That's not the case. They're actually on record saying, no, we're trying to make a playoff push. And you roll out that product last night. I'll tie this into it. Yesterday, I brought up Joel Embiid being the problem. And you and I had a really good, debate conversation about this. And we'll sort of rehash it because I look at last night making my point, because I'll pose it as a question to you, Mike Gill, and I'll say, who's to blame for that? And for me, I have to dig deep. It's a little bit layered. It's indirectly Joel Embiid's fault, right? This team gets crushed against, not crushed, but they lose against Brooklyn Nets. Joel Embiid is a shell of himself. And Joel Embiid hopping in and out of the lineup, Joel Embiid coming and going as he pleases, Joel Embiid not practicing, Joel Embiid being out of shape, this team always trying to cater and work around Joel Embiid. That is exhausting, and it takes a damn toll. And I think last night is the perfect example of Embiid being the problem.
Sure. That's an actual – I'll give that, yes. The fact that he's yo-yos in and out of the lineup, they never know if he's going to play. It's a constant problem. His injuries, his inability to stay healthy is, yes, a problem. That is not being, that is at the top of the list of one of the problems that this organization has had is your best player is also your most unreliable player, right? So in this season – this thing has gotten so out of control that how did the team not know that this was the problem? I mean, come on, seriously. You got to be kidding me that it's this bad, that they didn't know, that he couldn't start the season. Come on. I mean, this thing is a complete disaster for them. At the same time, you're only in the position you're in of somewhat championship aspirations, not this team, the past 6-7 years. Is because of Joel Embiid. Without him, you have failed in every angle possible. Every draft pick you have made other than Embiid has blown up in your face. Every deal that you have made has gone awry. Every decision you have made. Now, again, I just got done saying, I can't blame the owner. He has allowed them to spend money, make trades, hire coaches, fire coaches, and not small guys, championship coaches, high-level trades, top-level free agents, and none of it has worked. So for whatever reason, it has not worked out. I can't say that Joel Embiid's to blame for that. Now, that being said, he has played in playoff rounds. He has not been great in those playoffs. He has been an MVP player in the regular season. He has not been that same level of player in the playoffs. Now, part of that is, hey, teams defend him differently, and when they do, that's where the secondary players, they have not been good enough. They have not had a good enough team. So everybody has some sort of blame and finger, and Embiid is on that list and is near at the top because he is the best player. He is an MVP player. And because I think, and I don't know how many people believe, that he is a good enough talent to win a title. Does he have the mental makeup? Does he have the mental fortitude to be a championship player? That I don't know.
And that's sort of the answer, though, isn't it? That's bingo for me. Right? He's an NBA MVP. He's an enigma, though, because you're an NBA MVP, but we cannot answer the question if he has the mental fortitude or the toughness to even get past the second round. And I agree with you almost fully on the fact of, it's not all his fault. Of course not. It's not his fault that Daryl Morey pulls off an excellent trade, and I do want to get into Daryl Morey in a second, pulls off a lot of excellent moves to get this team seemingly out of the mud, and they've remained in the mud.
Right. When have they made a move where you were like, what the hell are they doing? Almost every move they have made in the last 8 years, you've been like, I like that move. That's a good move. Some of them are like, okay, I don't understand, what small little move here or there. But major moves, when was the time you were left scratching your head?
No, I'm with you. And listen, there's people calling for Daryl Morey's head and Daryl Morey's to blame. You're an idiot. You are an idiot, okay? Because you look at what Daryl Morey has done. He's been fantastic. He's gotten the Sixers out of the Ben Simmons mess, right? We talk about no one wants Joel Embiid's contracts. Let's rewind a couple of seasons with Ben Simmons, okay? No one expected the Sixers to get out of that situation for the player that they got in return in that deal. That was unbelievable. They got out of Al Horford. They got out of, like, every time we say, up, they're in a corner, they're done, they're KO'd, they Rocky Balboa us and they get up off the mat. And a lot of it's because of Daryl Morey. I think Morey's been fantastic. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, I think Morey's done a solid job. I mean, I think obviously you take a look at these moves, they haven't worked. It's like, so you do have this vocal group of people who did not want Paul George. They felt that he was too old and that he was broken down and that would have been a mistake.
Yeah.
I was not a huge fan of signing Paul George. However, I did say, listen, by just adding Paul George in the Tobias Harris spot, you've got to be better. You just have to be better because Harris was such a nothing burger in the playoffs. So you felt that just by making that swap, that the team would have been better. That said, did not love the move overall in the big picture. I thought they paid him too much. And quite frankly, you have Maxey here who you've essentially said, we don't look at you as that guy. We look at you as the other guy. We're bringing Paul George in here. So there was some mixed messaging on what they think of Maxey. Now you have this mess where George doesn't want to be here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're stuck with him for 3 more years, possibly could trade him. Okay, I mean, he's going to have to play well enough for someone to want to want him. He hasn't played.
Yeah, the NBA is crazy. There's a lot of idiots running these teams and these franchises. Like, someone's going to want Paul George. Paul George has been a multiple-time All-NBA player, multiple-time All-Star, right? Like, so there is a market for Paul George. I believe there's a market for Joel Embiid. It may not be the return and the haul that you should get for an NBA MVP. But I think at the end of the day, Mike Gill, if Daryl Morey and the 76ers want to move Joel Embiid, I think they can figure that out. I do. Maybe I'm naive.
I don't know. Maybe I don't think I personally. I mean, if you want pennies on the dollar, if you're just saying give us 2 second-round picks just to take his salary, but you got to match salaries. That's part of the problem. So someone's going to have to come up with $248 million worth of players to give you back in return.
Yeah, it'd have to be obviously it'd have to be a 4-team type of deal. And you're right. I don't know how that would work.
So my question becomes this.
Yeah.
Are you better off just taking pennies on the dollar, a bunch of spare parts, and now you're back into mediocrity, or saying, listen, shut you down now, and I got to just hope that knee is ready to play and that we get 3 really good chances at this?
Personally, if I'm able to move Joel Embiid, I'm closing this book on him. I'm done with him. I have my answer. I know who this guy is. I know this. I know how the story ends, the Joel Embiid story. They're not going to win a title with him. This knee ain't getting any better. This is a guy at his peak was out of shape. I mean, it's just, do we think this knee is just going to magically be healed and he's going to be a stud again? No way. No way.
No, I don't. I think this knee is going to be a constant problem.
This is it. And we knew this was coming, Mike. We knew. You and I have talked about this every year. Window of opportunity.
I don't think anybody thought it was this bad.
No, me either. And I'm not claiming I knew that. No one could have predicted this. But my point is, we all had the fear of it could come any day, any year, right? And it's here.
Listen, it's a shame because the guy's a joy to watch. When he's at his best, he is a joy to watch. I have had so much fun watching him play. I know he's frustrating at times, but unfortunately, his body has just not allowed him to be the player that he really is.
No, I mean, listen, the guy scored 70 points in a basketball game, okay? That's just, it's not human. We've seen superhuman performances from Joel Embiid at times, but his legacy, unfortunately, is going to be a very disappointing and frustrating one. Now, I do want to get to Maxey because you brought up a point with Maxey about how he seems to always get put in the back seat. He always gets put in the baby chair with the 76ers. Like, you're not good enough. We need Paul George. We need this guy. We need that guy. You're not really ever getting the keys to the car just yet. Do you believe Tyrese Maxey can be a legitimate piece for the 76ers long term?
Yeah, listen, I think he can be a piece. I cannot get on board. Key piece. Yes, he's a key piece. He is a very good second player. If he's your third player, you are really good. I am not the guy who says, get rid of everybody and build around Maxey. I've seen this team try to find ways to build around an undersized scoring guard. Quite frankly, I think Maxey has kind of regressed a little bit. I mean, he's not the same shooter he was last year. He's over 40% from three. It seems like every night he starts the game 1 for 8. Bad shot selection. I feel like he forces way too much. Now, that could be a byproduct of the team around him not being very good. But I worry about a 6'2", undersized, score-first guard and saying that's the guy. There's a lot of really good ones of those in the league. I don't remember any of them winning the title. Do you?
No. I mean, look, Steph Curry's a great passer. He doesn't get enough respect for his passing, but Curry's an undersized scorer. Now, he's the greatest of all time. I mean, not fair.
And he's a little bit big. I mean, he's like 6'6", 6'5", 6, so he is a little bit bigger. But his game is more of a perimeter base game. He's a good passer. He's not as good. He's not as explosive as a put the ball on the floor score like Maxey is. He's a better shooter than Maxey. He's got better range. I mean, I think Maxey has regressed at the 3 this year, and I think that's disappointing.
Would you consider to trade Maxey, something no one wants to discuss? Because here's a reminder, folks, and I was on record saying this way early in the year, before McCain got hurt. I said, listen, I love Maxey. This isn't an indictment on Maxey. McCain could be better than Maxey, all right? And they have that guy returning. A stud in McCain.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could trade Maxey with that thought in mind.
Well, you have to ask yourself, do you think Maxey and McCain can actually coexist? I think that's one of your questions as well. I was on record last year. I said I would have moved Maxey for Dame Lillard. Now, maybe I would have been wrong about that. I don't know if that would have changed anything for this team, but, I look at the Maxey as a secondary piece to a championship team, not the piece.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about McCain. Coming off this injury, I don't think it's major surgery. It's enough to keep him out the rest of the year. He was lighting it up. The guy was a joy to watch. I just don't know that those two guys can play together.
No, I think they can, and I think the team's going to want to find out. But I think that's an interesting little nugget to all of this, too, depending on how this season ends. We'll wrap this Sixers talk with this. How do you anticipate the team handling the rest of this year? Right? Do you anticipate shutting everyone down soon? How much worse can this thing get? Just put a bow on all of this ugliness.
Man, I don't know. A lot of the things they say makes you feel like they're still holding on because they are within distance of the 10 spot. Now, you got blown out by the 10th team. You lost at home to the 11 team. They have a 5-game stretch here that's not kind. You got the Knicks tomorrow night. That's going to be an ugly one. You play the Celtics coming up here. I know that. They got the Warriors. You think Jimmy Butler's probably salivating at the chance to dust this team. So, this next 5 games, you're going to be 20-some games under 500. I think the writing will be on the wall that they got to shut it down. Now, I don't know how you shut it down with the rules. I mean, do you just make up and say George can't play? I mean, he has been getting shots to get out there. The Maxey thing, he was questionable last night. But, I mean, how in good conscience do you say, Maxey, sorry, we're just not playing you the rest of the year? I don't know.
Right. And if anyone's potentially tradable, you probably want to have them play and try and get some more tape out there. Get George a couple 30-point games. Get Maxey, whatever. You just want to end on some type of a potential high note. But, my goodness, for Rye or Sigh, the 76ers are the definition, Mike Gill, of the biggest sigh, arguably in Philadelphia sports history right now at this season. It's that bad.
Yeah. By the way, I said Steph Curry 6'5". I was thinking of Clay. Clay's 6'5". Curry 6'2". Yeah.
Yeah, Curry's not 6'5", but
no, Clay. I was thinking of Clay, who's a little bit bigger, more of a catch and shoot guy. So yeah, but Steph's still more of that type of player than he's not the same type of player as Maxey.
No. All right, we have some a lot more topics to get into. Do we have some time before a break?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Well, yeah, we'll do another quick segment right now. We'll do another topic. Let's go.
All right, so a quick one. And we can carry this over, obviously, but let's switch to the Diamond, the baseball Diamonds, almost said Sixers. Phillies spring training, Major League Baseball spring training, the baseball ball strike challenge system, dude. Curious to get your thoughts because you're more of the traditional guy. I'm more of the not so traditional, but I think this is a no-brainer, man. I look at this system that they're testing out right now. It's been a home run, pun intended. And I think they should implement it right away. It can't be implemented until 2026, but my goodness, just let this thing into the game. How does Mike Gill feel about it?
100%. I don't know why they just don't do it right now, or at least the All-Star break. It's ridiculous to say, well, we have it. It's working flawlessly, yet we're not going to use it until next year. What's the difference? Who cares? This season's so long. Say, listen, after the All-Star break, we are going to implement this thing. We're going to keep using it in the minor leagues to perfect it even more, and by the All-Star break, it will be implemented into games here. I don't know how they can't just come to some sort of resolution on that. Like, oh, well, we already said – no, the season hasn't started yet. Change your mind. Put the thing in. It works flawlessly. It works fast. It happens immediately. It should be in all games immediately. Period. Point blank. Not even a discussion.
Enough said. Mic drop. I'm with you. It's awesome. It's exactly what the game's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, and you're sitting there. It takes, 2 seconds to do it? The guy taps his head. All of a sudden, the thing comes up. By the way, it's probably faster than they actually do it because they want to put the graphic up on the screen. It's almost like, hey, we already have the answer. Well, hold on. We want to show the graphic of where it was before you do it. No, it happens in immediacy because basically there are leagues that don't have umpires. They use the system right off the bat. And what happens is there's a guy that sits behind home plate. He tells the umpire in his ear, and the umpire gives the signal.
Yeah, it's that simple. And it makes me wonder about robot umps and just doing this bigger scale. But I wouldn't be opposed to it. I know I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
No, and listen, I think I saw in the Phillies game the other day, they had some wonky rules, like you can do it if you get 2 challenges. Because Rob Thompson has said to the veteran players, don't use it. Let the guys who are trying to make the team use it because they need like an at-bat more than you do. So if you get called out on strike 3, don't waste it if unless you really, really, really think it's there. Let the younger guys who are trying to make this team, if they get banged out on a strike 3, let them use it. So they have kind of talked about it, but you get 2 challenges. If it works, you get to retain it. If you don't, you lose it. And the only people who can call it is the pitcher, the catcher, and the hitter.
Yeah, makes sense, dude. I love it. I mean, it would make sense for the manager to possibly be involved, but whatever. It's been a success, and I can't wait for them to hopefully implement it into Major League Baseball permanently.
Yeah, me too. All right, we'll do another segment of Rye or Sigh coming up. Interesting to see what the next topic is. Stick around for that. It's next on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Follow along, be a part of the show. Coming up, one more segment of Rye or Sigh and the Bet365 play of the day. Still to come on the Sports Bash. 5:30 Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. We've got Phil's with a win today in the spring training portion of the schedule. They beat the Yankees. Love spring training. Ready for the season to start. All right, let's get into it. More Sigh. Ryan Rothstein's back for another segment here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Now, I like spring training. I'm not like, spring training's fun. It's like NFL exhibition games. The first one, you're like, yeah. And then you're like, all right, I don't need to see any more of that. Basketball and hockey, like no one even pays attention to their preseason. Baseball, though, give me more. I'll take 2 months of games down in Clearwater.
Utah, give me 2.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch it up.
Well, the one thing is they're talking about expanding the NCAA tournament.
Dude, how much more expanding can they do before it's just...
As someone who loves the tournament, I am against the expansion of the tournament because, I go to spring training every year during the tournament to watch the games, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If they expand it, you would have games from noon to midnight on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I mean, it would be outrageous.
I mean, how much more money do they need? I think this is perfect, the way March Madness is currently set up. Like, just don't force it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's too many teams there's just too many average teams. Yeah, there's too many average teams. Now you're saying, well, we have more average teams we want to put in. Yeah, I digress. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's a bold strategy by them. All right, let's go to the gridiron. Let's get back to the champs. That is the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, there's a lot of talk around Myles Garrett. He is the prized potential, possession here in free agency, and just for teams all over the NFL, the favorite to possibly land Myles Garrett, Washington. They're plus 250 at DraftKings to land Myles Garrett this offseason. And Eagles and Howie have been continued to get more and more linked to Myles Garrett. And I sort of scratch my head because on one hand, I say it's a Howie move, Mike Gill, but the other part of me says it's not. Right? For a team that just came off a Super Bowl win against the Kansas City Chiefs, and I know you always want to get better. You're losing some pieces. I understand that. You got to pay a premium right now if you want to potentially acquire Myles Garrett. I think it's like 19 and change million next year, 20 and change the following year, 40 million in 2027. It's a lot of cash, man. I don't know if I approve of this move. I know it sounds crazy. What are your thoughts?
I think it is crazy. I approve, and I approve with a big stamp of approval. Look, they have a window right now, 2 to 3 years with this core group of guys. Hurts in the entire offense. They're all in their late, mid-20s. You go for it. You go for it because you're going to lose Josh Sweat. You're going to lose Milton Williams most likely. How do you replace them? You go get this guy, and you pair him up with Jalen Carter, and you say our defense is even better than the one that won last year. This is the move that Howie Roseman – I don't want to say that puts him over the top because I think he's already a Hall of Famer. But this is the move that the legacy is unmatched. You win another Super Bowl back-to-backs in Philadelphia, I mean, you go down as maybe the greatest sports figure in the history of the city. And you do a move like this to make that happen. That's what you do. I said it all along.
That type of a move.
Absolutely. To me, I've been saying this throughout the offseason so far, which I know has only been about 2 weeks or 3 weeks since the Super Bowl. But the Dodgers went out and won a World Series and then went out and got the best pitcher on the market and then added another pitcher and said, what? You want to complain that we won the World Series and we got better? That's what Howie Roseman, I think, wants to do. You guys we won a Super Bowl and we're going to go out and get the best player we can to make this team even better. Boom.
But what would be the cost, right? What would Howie Roseman have to give up? Like that's a factor, obviously. But that's a factor. If it's an absurd premium, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're talking about draft choices, first-round picks. This team is loaded with young talent. I think you can afford – you have a 2-year window right now. This is it. You got a 2 to 3 year window to go get 2 or 3 Super Bowls. You've got a bunch of young players in your coffers. You've hit on every single one of them. At some point, you're going to miss on a draft pick. So guess what? I'm not taking my chances right now. I'll let someone else draft while I'm hot, and I'll go get a player that had 14 sacks and has been a defensive player of the year.
But haven't we seen this story before? And Howie has learned from his mistakes, right? Like, well, the window is now. Let's go and bolster up. Let's bring guys back, right? Like we saw that after they won the Super Bowl 8 years ago. I don't know if he wants to mortgage the future. I'm not necessarily saying a Garrett move would do that, but it would hinder the future. And that's not like Howie right now.
Well, though? You're picking 30 seconds, so you're picking a guy that may or may not help you out. He might be a starter, maybe he's not. I mean, I'm getting a guy for 2 to 3 years. I mean, it's not like I'm getting nothing here. I'm getting a guy that should be fine for at least 2 to 3 years. He's 29 years old, and that's not to say. Listen. The Eagles are going to have a bunch of compensatory picks if they lose Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. I hope they don't lose Zach Bond, Mekhi Becton. So you could be getting a boatload of compensatory picks coming your way to kind of replenish some of the things. You've also got a lot of young players on this team. So at 32, if I basically said I lost Josh Sweat, but I replaced him with Myles Garrett, I could draft a defensive tackle in the 3rd or 4th round. Like you get Milton Williams was a 3rd round pick. I don't have to pick 32 to replenish what I have because I have enough talent right now. What I do need to do is draft in the middle rounds to get some depth behind the guys that I currently have.
Yeah, listen, I'm fine. I'll give up the 32nd pick all day long, every day of the week. I'm with you. I'm just assuming the cost is going to be more than that. It's going to be multiple first-round picks.
I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be multiple first-round picks. And if it is, I mean, I think it's only 2 this year and possibly next year because of his age. I mean, you can't say, hey, I'm going to give you 4 first-round picks. The guy's 30 years old. He's got a lot of money still in the contract that I have to take care of. He's got 2 years left on the deal. So I don't think you can justify if you are – now, you might say, hey, I want 2 first-round picks, but I think that's it. I don't think you have to do – it's not like a Herschel Walker deal where I'm giving you 8 first-round picks, my whole draft, a wedding dress, and something else.
Wedding dress, sir.
That was Ricky Williams, the draft. When Ricky Williams, remember, he got traded to the Saints, and he had the whole he had the wedding dress on the ESPN, the magazine.
Yeah, that was a legendary draft. I had a Ricky Williams Saints jersey, but no one cares about me. Let's go to – actually, I want to add this point because I would assume this would impact signing Bond, right? Are you fine with that? I just want to throw it out there. Is it Bond or Garrett? You take Garrett 10 out of 10 times? Right? That's
I don't
the
know.
other thing.
I personally don't think it. I think you can fit them both. I mean, I don't think it's one or the other.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Roseman is very crafty at this stuff. And it's not just Roseman, by the way. It's Laurie's ability and willingness to pay the money up front. That's where the Eagles, like, people are like, how come the Eagles can do it and not other teams? The Bengals, for instance, Joe Burrow said the Eagles can figure it out. Well, Mike Brown, the owner, he doesn't want to give you a $30 million signing bonus. He wants to pay that money out over the lifetime of the contract. Jeffrey Lurie says, you got a $30 million signing bonus. If that's going to help us under the cap, I'll pay you $30 million today so that I can get relief down the road. Not every owner is willing to do that.
No, and that's what separates them. So, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there, man. Listen, I'm not saying I don't want Garrett, but I think the cost, what you'd have to give up, and sort of cliche and minor point, but the locker room fit, the culture fit. I think that's something to keep in the back of your minds. But
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Myles Garrett is like the Cleveland Browns like recipient of the Man of the Year award.
He's a good dude. I'm not saying he's a scumbag. He's a crumb. I just think how he fits, how he fits in with the other guys and how he fits in with the team. And
I'm just saying. I mean, he's up for Man of the Year, so Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So I think he'll fit in pretty good.
All right, fine. I'm just trying to push back against Garrett for some reason. And listen, take it away.
Man. Come on, embrace it. Embrace the best defensive end that you could possibly add. I mean, come on. If you're looking for a way to win a back-to-back and you could lose an edge rusher, how about adding the best one in the league?
I don't hate it. It just, for me, for whatever reason, and maybe I'm definitely overthinking it, it just doesn't feel like a Howie thing. Like coming off a Super Bowl win, knowing you don't have a ton of cap space. It's an interesting dynamic, but you're right, dude. I ain't going to be complaining if and when they are able to pull that off. It would be spectacular, absolutely spectacular.
I agree.
All right. Ryer Sigh, let's keep it with the birds, as the tush push is somehow staying at the top of the headlines here locally and nationally. It has been announced that the Green Bay Packers were the team that said, "Wah, we don't want the tush push anymore." And Nick Sirianni sort of whacked right back at him and said, "It's unfair that the Green Bay Packers are doing this to us being the Philadelphia Eagles." Sirianni, I don't know if you touched on this earlier, but Sirianni went on to discuss how much time and effort and practice it has taken this Eagles team to perfect the brotherly shove. So what does Mike Gill think of all this tush push nonsense?
All right, so we talked a little bit about this yesterday when it came out. I actually think the play should be banned. I think it should be, but I just don't think you should be allowed to have two players stand behind and use force to push another guy forward. Like, to me, that's something like on defense. You can't push a guy and get leverage to block an extra point. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to push off of a guy to jump over a lineman to get leverage. You can't use leverage to gain an advantage. I don't know how they allow the offensive side of the ball to have leverage to push a pile forward. To me, that just seems like it shouldn't be allowed. That being said, I don't want it to go away. My personal opinion is the play should not be allowed. That being said, I heard what Sirianni said today about how much time and what goes into them running that play. So I do feel like maybe they do have a strategic way that they do it that other teams have not figured out how to do.
I think that's certainly the case. I would agree with you from like the league's perspective. If the league stepped in over the years and said, hey, fellas, can't do this. Can't do it for the reasons you just listed. Okay, fine. But for other teams to be complaining, it's like, all right, well, you go perfect this then. Like, you go do it. It's they're not hiding any secret sauce to what's making this successful. We all know. So go practice it, and you can be exactly like the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't get what they're
like. I like that he said, "Look, we practice this. We do a lot. How much time we put into it, all the things, how intricate it is, all that stuff." Like, I get it. Like, so I'm cognizant of that. I just don't think you should be able to physically have multiple players forcibly pushing forward on the play. I feel like that's goes a little too far. But hey, I'm cool with it if it stays. I'm not going to sit here and say it should be gone. I'm just being objective by saying, I do think I understand. Now, I don't know what Green Bay's reasoning is and some of the other reasonings are, but I'm sure they have their reasons because they can't stop it or whatever. I'm sure safety is sometimes a factor here, although that was never brought up.
Yeah, I mean, they just want to be that dude that's complaining about the tush push. I think it's weak sauce. It's just a bad look, man. It's just a bad look. But do you think it could impact this team? Let's say it gets banned. How much of an impact do you think
that's a good
that would have?
question. Like, how successful are they as a team because they have that play? I mean, Jeff Kerr tweeted this out today. Let me pull this up from my man. Kerr is the stataholic, man. He's got all the stats. He tweeted this out today. Let's see. Essentially, they have converted. Here we go. The Eagles,
I would say 95% of them, if I had to guess.
What is your guess?
95%.
That they converted. Okay. Here is the tweet from Kerr. Let me put it up on the video screen for the people watching.
And I think 95 is a low guess, honestly.
All right. So the Eagles were 39 of 48 converting the tush push into a first down or touchdown, 81%. Although, of the 9 times they failed, they did it again and converted. So essentially, they ended up making a first down or touchdown 47 of 48 times.
So wait a second, just to clarify here. Of the 9 times that they failed, they went right back up to the line of scrimmage and converted on the very next play, you're saying?
They followed it up, and they failed 9 times, he's saying. They followed it up with another tush push 8 times and made it every time.
Okay, so that's and he went on to say essentially 47 to 48, 98. That's 98%. I view it as 98%.
Yeah, 97.9%. They have successfully finished up with a score or a touchdown when they have used that play.
Them knowing that's in their back pocket, right? Every time they have the ball is a
No
big deal.
question.
It's a
No
big
question. Yeah, because it allows them to know on third down, I don't have to get 5 yards if it's third and they know they have that play that they can run a fourth down play right after it.
The mindset has to be, forget even third down, MG. It's every 1st and 10 is 1st and 8 in their minds.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a huge deal. So I don't want to see it go away for that reason alone.
I don't want to see it go away. I'm just saying, if I was like the commissioner and they asked me, to be fair, I say I think that play is probably needs to be outlawed.
Yeah. No,
all right, that's a good day today. Good Ryer Sigh.
Yeah, man, it's fun.
I'll do it again tomorrow. Stick back and check us out. Got the Flyers tonight. No Sixers tonight, thankfully. They play the Knicks tomorrow night. That ought to be fun.
Yeah, so much fun. Can't wait.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow, man.
Later, man.
All right, Ryer Sigh here on the Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Also, don't forget, download the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. You can message us through the app on your phone. It's easy to do. Hit message us. The messages will come right to the Ocean Casino Resort Studios. All right, when we come back, got today's Bet365 play of the day to wrap up the show. All right, 5:52, getting ready to get out of here with the Bet365 play of the day. It's brought to you by Bet365, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Last night, we went 1-1 with our plays, which makes us 115, 79, and 1 with the Bet365 plays of the day. 115, 79, and 1. Tonight, I got one play for you. That's it. I got one. My man Josh is off today, so I didn't do as much research as usual because I had too many other things going on. But Luka and the Lakers taking on the Dallas Mavericks tonight. I got over the number 231. No defense in this game. A lot of cameras, a lot of oohs, a lot of ahs. I like the over tonight, 231, Lakers, Mavericks. That game is in L.A. And that's my Bet365 play of the day. Great having everybody be a part of the show today. Got a lot of text messages late in the game. We'll hit them tomorrow. 609-403-0973. Store it in your phone. Hit us up on the text board as always. And don't forget, tomorrow we're back with more Sports Bash, including Mike McGarry. We'll do some football at 4 as the Combine continues. The Nuggets, Ryer Sigh, everybody out there, have a great rest of your Tuesday night. Coming up next, it is the best of the Sports Bash. Josh has the night off tonight. Ooh, man, busy show today. Thanks to our guest today, Ric Serritella, who joined us live today on the NFL Combine. Frank's Mailbag, Adam Caplan with some updates on what Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni had to say. The Nuggets, Ryer Sigh, back again tomorrow. By the way, Flyers hockey tonight against the Penguins. You can listen to the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tim Saunders and Todd Fedoruk on the call of that one. All right, we got you back tomorrow. Got the best of the Sports Bash coming up next right here on 97.3 ESPN. Your home for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Looking forward to be back tomorrow with you guys out there. Have a great night, everybody. See ya.